Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to receive your chairman, vice chairman and chief executive.
Thank you all for joining us. Please stay stood whilst we're led in prayer.
Loving Father, we give you thanks that we are able to be here together this evening. We pray for all those who are unable through illness to not be with us this evening. We give you thanks that we are called to service, that we work for the good of all, that we consider all in our work. We give you thanks for the opportunity to openly share our differences and respectfully disagree, working towards the common good. And we take a moment just to think of brothers and sisters across the world who are unable to live in a place of democracy or freedom. And we pray for peace to come in places of conflict. We gather all these thoughts and offer them to you, Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Jane Parker. Please all take a seat. Welcome to this full council meeting of the 26th of February. Could we start with declarations of interest? So with none received and no hands going up, we go next to apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies for absence from Councillors Adams, Clapworthy, A. Hardman, Hartley, Homer and Tasker.
Thank you. And seeing no other hands around the room, we go to minutes of the previous meeting. If there are no corrections called to this one, I'm happy to propose these. Could I have a second? Oh, apologies.
Chairman, I know Mel is harking back to halcyon days, but I definitely didn't chair this meeting as listed.
Thank you for spotting that. Small things. Okie doke. So with that correction, I'm happy to propose these as correct. Could I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I have all those in favour?
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. So, next we have my chairman's announcements. So welcome, councillors, officers and guests. It's good to see you for our first council meeting of the new year, and I hope since our last meeting in December, you've all had a restorative Christmas and New Year's before keeping up with the national plans for unitary councils as they affect us here in Wychavon and the wider Worcestershire. Starting with a thank you to all those who joined me after the last full council for festive refreshments, and a thank you to our officer team for arranging that. Following this, our Wychavon offices stayed in the spirit with a Christmas fun day. I continued my own holiday activities with an invite to Prince Henry's High School Christmas concert and 2 sessions of carolling with the Evesham and then the Droitwich Salvation Army branches. 2025 started with representatives of Wychavon welcoming GreenSafe IT to the Berry Hill Industrial Estate on Droitwich Spa. Next, I took a trip to St Egwin's School in Evesham to see great passion for teaching and for learning. Unfortunately, I had to give apologies for the Worcester Holocaust Memorial Service, but was afforded a foray to the city later for the Worcester Civic Service. In the spirit of romance, I supported the Mayor of Evesham's Valentine's dinner by treating my parents to the evening out and to the excellent meal. Most recently, I had the honour of helping unveil a stunning window front art piece in the Droitwich Spa High Street, commemorating the comedy career of Rick Mayall and promoting the upcoming comedy festival in his name. Finally, through February, I have chaired meetings with members of Parliament representing areas of our district to equip them with information to support our residents, to ensure our voice as a district is heard in Parliament, and most prominently, to gain their insights on the government devolution plans. Thank you. And next we go to item 6, public participation. We have one question and petition from Alex Pawley, who I believe is not present, and also from Sylvia Wilkinson and Samantha Pegg. And this is regarding 17 Ombersley Road, Droitwich. Do they need to ask the question first? Excellent. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. This is on behalf of the residents of Droitwich Central and, more in particular, the residents that surround in the area around 17 Ombersley Road. We understand that 17 Ombersley Road is in the process of being purchased by Wychavon District Council and converted into homeless accommodation for 18 to 25-year-olds. We object to this over concerns of the impact on the existing local residents, in particular noting that there are already 2 similar homes in close vicinity, which have caused problems for local residents in the past. Historically, there were 2 properties on Ombersley Road, just a few doors down from this property, that were used for housing 18 to 25-year-olds. In fact, they were younger, I think they were 16 to 20-year-olds. And their behaviour caused a lot of disturbance and concern to local residents, including myself. There's limited resources in the quiet area to accommodate the needs of these 18 to 25-year-olds. And we're concerned of future usage of the property.
Pardon, I think you're, if you could just press it down. You don't need to hold it down.
Okay,
press.
sorry.
Thank you.
Our question for the Chair is therefore why the Council thinks that this provision is suitable at Ombersley Road, given the past issues in this area. The further concentration of such provision in this area will create in the immediate area and in particular result in potential impact on the local residents.
Thank you. And I believe we have a response from Councillor Rick Deller.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for your question. I appreciate your concerns, but hopefully I can give you some context around it. So since 2018, we have seen a number of people aged 16 to 24 approaching us for homelessness support increase by 323%. In response to this, we bought and transformed a property in Evesham into a managed housing scheme to support young people at risk of homelessness in partnership with the homeless charity, or the youth homeless charity, St Basil's. The scheme doesn't just provide a roof over a young person's head, but staff work with them to give them life skills, qualifications and training so they can move on to live independently in their own accommodation. The scheme has been tremendously successful. So far, 30 young people have been supported by Merstow Place, with 17 of them having worked through their issues and challenges to complete an accredited life skills course and move on to live in their own long-term home. But the real proof of this success isn't in statistics, but in the significant difference we are making to the lives of those who need our help. Like one young woman who had a baby while at Merstow Place, the support she received enabled her to remain the primary carer for her child, rather than have the child taken into care. She completed a Prince's Trust course and secured independent accommodation for her and her daughter. She was invited to attend a meeting of Worcestershire's Corporate Parenting Board to showcase the impact of a supported accommodation like Merstow Place. It's because of success stories like that we are committed in our Wychavon plan to create a new scheme in the north of the district, and we are looking at purchasing a property in Droitwich Spa. We looked at several properties in and around the town, but they have not been suitable or available for a variety of reasons. The property in question meets all the criteria we're looking for perfectly, and this one that is in an ideal location, close to services and employment opportunities and transport links. We're not going to discuss the price we paid for the property as it's part of the commercial sale, still being processed and therefore is confidential. However, it was an appropriate offer consistent with the independent valuation of the property and within the budget allocated and approved by council as part of the usual budget setting processes. But it should be pointed out, doing nothing is not a cost-free option. If these young people end up on the streets, there is a societal and financial cost to dealing with that. Or if they meet the criteria for temporary accommodation, then that places a considerable burden on our budgets. It's far better for the individual and for us financially to be proactive and manage these young people before they get into crisis. That's what the scheme in Evesham does, and that's what we are seeking to do in Droitwich. I understand the concerns that you have given of some past difficulties in the area, but these fears are based on misinformation. We are committed to engaging with residents to try and allay your concerns and to properly explain this scheme. Senior officers from this council have committed to attending a residents' meeting in March to explain the proposed scheme in more detail and provide reassurance that you are looking for. And I am happy personally to meet with you and any resident who has concerns. What we are proposing will be unlike anything else that has been or already exists in the area. These are vulnerable young people at risk of rough sleeping or sofa surfing, and in need of support to get them back on their feet and transform their lives, rather than becoming another statistic of a wasted generation. The scheme will be managed by a partner yet to be procured, and there will be strict rules in place for governing the behaviour of those living within the scheme. I wholeheartedly and unwaveringly support this scheme, and we will engage with you about your concerns and offer reassurance where we can. It is vital that we proceed with the purchase of this property. If we do not, then the scheme will not happen, and the opportunity to change the lives of the most vulnerable people will be lost. We, and more importantly, the young people are appealing for us to help, and we cannot afford that to happen.
Thank you. I hope that's alleviated some concerns around this project. So, this takes us next on to, right, before we move on to the next item, just returning to the chairman's announcements, as I'd forgotten a couple of late notes. We have sad news to give of the passing of David Noyes, a former councillor of Wychavon, and for any wishing to pay their respects, his funeral is at the Fladbury Crematorium tomorrow at 11 a.m. Also with the sad news of the passing of Thomas Dunn, whose memorial will be at the Hereford Cathedral at 2 p.m. on the 2nd of May. And finally, item 13 of this agenda will be taken before item 12. So be prepared for that when we get to it. Back to the agenda. We next go to item 7, petitions from members of the council, of which we have none. And next we have 8 notices of motion from the members of the council. We have 2 notices of motion this evening, starting with number 1, support for the creation of a banking hub in Droitwich. We go first to Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So this motion comes on the back of the work being done by Droitwich Town Council in association with Droitwich Place Board. So last year, now in 2023 now, Droitwich Town Council decided that they would begin to make leeway on exploring the opportunities around opening a banking hub in Droitwich. And since then, the work has sped up, and now Droitwich Place Board, which is chaired by Matt Nichol, a local business owner, have joined in and are really starting to make some leeway and starting a petition and beginning to rally up the support of Droitwich residents. And this came on the back of the fact that Cash Access UK and Link, who do the assessments on whether a town should have a banking hub, decided last year that Droitwich doesn't need one. Now, Droitwich 10 years ago had 6 banks. It had a Barclays, it had a NatWest, it had a Halifax, it had a HSBC, it had a Lloyds, it had a Santander. It's now just got one of those. Only Santander remains, with 2 units sitting vacant, one being turned into a Papa John's pizza, one an accountancy firm, and another a charity shop. There simply aren't the banking facilities available within Droitwich to support businesses or residents. Local businesses, we spoke to a number of them as this campaign has started to gain some leeway, and we've been speaking to businesses up and down the high street who still take cash. And we're being told that they're now being treated like banks. People are going into the local butchers or into a clothes shop or into a number of the bakeries or coffee shops and asking for change for their 20 that they've got out the cash machine because there's simply nowhere to get change. We're seeing business owners now having to travel to Bromsgrove and into even places like Kidderminster and Worcester to bank their cash, get some change and speak to somebody in person. And as for our residents, for those who don't drive or for those with mobility issues, to access banking facilities now requires them to travel to neighbouring towns. Droitwich is a large town. Droitwich is home to over 10,000 residents, and it needs these facilities in place to support the community. Businesses need somewhere that they can go and bank their cash. They need somewhere that they can get change. They need somewhere that they can speak to advisors about getting loans, get advice, and residents need somewhere that they can deposit cheques, withdraw cash, and seek advice as and when they need it. And they should not be forced to drive to other towns. So the work being done at the moment is to ask Link and Cash Management to review the decision that they made last year, to review the decision that they made to not allow us to have a banking hub and to have a U-turn on that policy and introduce one. So I propose the motion as presented and hope that you can all join me in supporting it. And for any of those of you who are local, we've got a number of Corex boards with details to the survey being put out for anybody who may like one of those to help spread the message. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. And I believe we have a seconder, Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm more than pleased to second this motion and thank Councillor Birch for bringing it forward. This is important to our community. The request for a banking hub was started through the Droitwich Town Council Communities and Amenities Committee in February 2024. Mark Keld, our Town Clerk, wrote to Santander in April of 2024 on behalf of Droitwich Town Council, given their status as the remaining bank in the town following withdrawal of Lloyds later in that year. Following the intervention of Nigel Huddleston MP in December 24, they finally provided a response. Although rather non-committal, the Town Clerk has looked into various peer town activity about banking hubs. Interest was registered with the Link Network organisation, as Councillor Birch has said, in June as the next part of the process for consideration towards a suitable community banking hub for Droitwich Spa. The cash access consultant has responded and informed that their feasibility studies do not currently support a community banking hub for the town. Their rationale is based on previously carried out public consultation work in the community. Since then, Matt Nichol, on behalf of the Place Board, and the Town Clerk have challenged Link over their last survey and resultant decision-making from September 24. Link maintain their position and a somewhat flawed outlook in suggesting that Bromsgrove has suitable alternative financial representation to meet Droitwich's need. However, Halifax and Lloyds have recently announced closure of their Bromsgrove outlets, and Bradley Thomas MP, who we know well, is campaigning for a banking hub for that town in similar circumstances. Matt Nichol and the Town Clerk have drawn up an online questionnaire which was launched last week with an aspiration of 10,000 responses. This will provide evidence to support challenging the Link decision to be reconsidered. They also finalised a supporting press article being put out by Matt through his media team to profile the questionnaire. A flavour of the many responses to the questionnaire already indicates why this is needed. We really need a bank hub in Droitwich. A lot of the residents are elderly and can't travel to Bromsgrove or Worcester and can't manage to do online banking. Secondly, I'm filling this in for my mum, as she doesn't do Facebook, social media, and she will only drive to Droitwich, no further. So now it has to be taken to her bank, which she'd already changed as her original bank was closing. Third, my son has special needs. Going to Worcester causes so much anxiety. Fourth, business cheques online only allow up to £2,000 to be deposited. We need a hub to be able to have better time management and accessibility for businesses in Droitwich. To date, there have been over 1,200 responses. Yesterday, I spoke to the Director of Public Health and Adult Social Care about the campaign, and they said the lack of banking is adding to digital isolation for a number of people in our society who fear technology and may be subject to scams. This affects mental health and develops further issues where solutions are needed. I also spoke to Tonya Enderbury of Droitwich CVS, and she said it's not just the older generation that are struggling and having to access their bank accounts online or travel to another town. We work with people that don't have a smartphone or data, credit, or aren't able to access public transport or afford taxis to get to their other towns. Face-to-face support is so much more valuable than through a computer or a voice at the end of the phone. It affects everyone within the community. There is clearly an unintended consequence on bank closures for many in society and many small businesses. Whilst this is an electronic survey, the Town Council and Droitwich CVS can facilitate physical responses and are liaising with Citizens Advice and care homes and other charities to help gain responses. I second this motion.
Thank you. A well-informed and hugely valuable community initiative. Are there any questions or issues around the room before we go to the vote? Question at the back. Councillor.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I think this is a great initiative, actually. I know in Broadway, in the Coop, the co-op, where there is a post office, that you have to choose the right time to go and buy something, because the queue to go for shops, to go shop owners, retailers, to go and change their money or pay the money in is massive. I just wondered, how does the hub work? Does it work exactly like a bank? Is it sort of every day or sort of 2 or 3 hours a day or something? Thank you.
So Richard may have more to add. So I know Pershaw's got one as well, so I can see Dan's waving his hand. But they can work in various different ways. Quite often when a bank shuts down, as a goodwill gesture, they tend to offer to put somebody in a library for a couple of days so that, you know, there's somebody there. That's not what we need in Droitwich. We need a proper banking hub, which is a physical location that remains. It's there 7 days a week. That's what it is. It's a building designated to being a banking hub. It does nothing else. So that's the push that we're going for in Droitwich. Different towns, different villages have different models, but in Droitwich, what Mark and Matt are pushing for is a physical location, so it'll look like a bank, it'll feel like a bank, it'll serve residents and businesses like a bank.
Councillor Boatwright Green.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, as we've got a hub in Pershore, it probably makes sense just to quickly explain kind of the situation we're in, because we have no banks at this point. We met the criteria by not having a bank, and it seemed absurd to us that we had to wait until we hit the point where we had nothing before someone would come to us. And as someone who didn't bank in the one bank we had, it was even more absurd to me that I basically had to wait until something was at catastrophic points before we'd actually get anything. The big issue with this is the fact that actually a lot of the time you just need to go in and get advice. And regardless of age, regardless of anything, sometimes you just need to go and talk to somebody. And one of the things we have found as a result of having the hub is that that's back. So someone actually can go and have a word with their bank, go and have a conversation with a human being. You can then fix that problem that very quickly can descend into quite a difficult situation. And especially where people are facing kind of financial difficulties or when they're dealing with something quite complicated, having that face-to-face contact is really key, because it enables them to actually see there's a human behind it rather than quite threatening letters or what can appear quite threatening letters. So it's actually enabled us as councillors to support residents where we know they're struggling with their mortgages, where they're struggling with credit card debt, or where we know that having that human face-to-face moment will actually reassure them that this can help. The way ours currently works is it's in the library. It's a temporary fixture there at the moment. It's hoped that we'll end up in a permanent building at some point. However, having it in the library has meant that it's accessible to people, because the library is a public building where people go into quite regularly, and actually it has a double benefit in the fact that then people go into the banking hub and then actually use the library as well. So there's actually this kind of symbiotic relationship that actually might help us with an asset that we actually want people to make use of more. I think with a lot of this, keep an open mind. 6 days a week with a bank, 7 days, I think you're asking for too much. Sundays, I mean, yeah, go for it by all means. Go for the sky. But I think we have to be kind of realistic that this is going to be what we need in most of our towns over the next kind of 10, 15, 20 years. And so absolutely get in there before you lose your last bank, because at the moment I don't trust banks when they tell me they're going to stay on the high street, as every single one of them that said that to me, they're not there anymore.
Thank you. Unless there are any other objections, Councillor Crump.
Just one other thing to add. You're talking about post offices. The post office, I don't know how much everybody's aware that you can bank money and you can get money from the post offices. Everyone except for Nationwide, I think it is. I'm having a word with Nationwide because it's just like, why aren't they doing it? But everybody else does. So at least we've got that, and we do want to use the post offices as well. So again, we don't lose those either. I know Pershore is very well used for this. When I had my shop, I used to send ladies in there all the time, and so many people didn't realise what the post offices could do. So certainly in an interim period, it's probably good to advertise the fact of the post offices as well.
Thank you. So now, one more before we go to the vote.
So a quick one about post offices. There's also the mobile post offices that go around the villages. So you could promote that as well, because they're really popular and useful.
Thank you. So, all those in favour? That's unanimous. Wonderful, thank you. We go next to the second part of this item, the domestic abuse support, being proposed by Councillor Neil Franks.
Good evening, councillors. The National Audit Office, in a recent report, have reframed violence against women and girls as an epidemic that is a significant and growing problem due to nationally disjointed efforts, with it affecting 1 in 12 women in England and Wales at any one time and 1 in 4 women over a lifetime, causing harm to victims and impacting on services, family and the wider community. A woman was murdered by her male partner every 3 days in the year 2020 to 2021, and in the same year there were 12,887 recorded incidents of domestic abuse in Worcestershire, with the number of actual incidences much higher. Last year, I was contacted by a lady called Amy Peoples, who works as a community engagement lead at Worcester Community Trust. She asked whether I would be interested in training to both help understand and tackle domestic abuse. My knowledge around domestic abuse at that time was very limited, to say the least. So I took up Amy's kind offer. The training was as horrifying as it was brilliantly provided by Amy. The training included victims of domestic abuse on the course, and the discussions about what their abusers had done to them physically, socially, and psychologically was horrifying. I want to pay tribute to them, as after everything they went through, they were there in the training as they wanted to give back to their communities and support other victims. I have included this training as part of my motion, as the support from the Worcester Community Trust continues after the training, providing regular updates to the community champions and further provides support. So if I have questions or I come across a particularly difficult situation, they are there to support me as well. Domestic abuse can come in many forms and not limited to the following: coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional abuse, economic abuse, stalking, harassment, isolation, sexual and physical abuse, and using children against the victim. And not to mention the short-term and long-term impacts on the children victims caught up in it. The vast majority of victims are women. However, men can, of course, suffer domestic violence, with around 1 to 6 to 7 in their lifetime doing so. They are victims too and need supporting, and it is good to see that Worcestershire County Council hosts a male domestic abuse helpline as well. Risks can also increase when victims have a disability, mental health issues from the LGBTIQA+ community, the elderly, young people aged 16 to 25, and pregnancy risks increases the risk threefold. Since I completed the Domestic Abuse Community Champion course, I've set about trying to better understand what can be achieved, as well as understand what support is available. I want to thank Jen Taylor and the officers in the Housing Department, Faye, Stephanie and Lisa, that met myself, Councillor Rick Della and Councillor Rick Hayden-Reeves, who provided a lot of great information, and it was fantastic to hear the valuable work they do to help victims of domestic abuse. I also sought advice from Paul Street, a retired police officer who works for the Colmore bid in Birmingham, who has done a huge amount of work improving the area he works in now, for women to feel safe and supported, including training and promoting male allies so they know how to react and where to turn when the signs of domestic abuse become clear or even just suspected. I also met with Richard Gray of the Holly Gazzard Trust to learn about the amazing free app that they have developed to support domestic abuse victims off the back of a terrible incident where Holly was murdered by an ex-partner in her workplace. Around 1/3 of all domestic homicides happen in the workplace. I've also talked to residents, colleagues, family and friends and read many articles on how women don't often feel safe when out and about, and that's why I've asked for a women's safety charter to be developed. My motion is not designed to address every aspect of how we can tackle domestic abuse or women's safety. Instead, it aims to create the foundations for increasing support and awareness by exploring having a role to coordinate our efforts and work with elected members, our communities, businesses and partners. The role would create a Wychavon women's safety and domestic abuse strategy to bring together the best ideas from around the country, continually learn and improve what we do, in addition to the fantastic support already provided. The strategy would, of course, include all victims of domestic abuse. I really hope that members will get behind my motion to start the process of working together to tackle domestic abuse in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have a seconder, Councillor Julie Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. I honestly don't think I can add anything to what Neil has already said. And I think we all recognise how awful domestic abuse is of male and female, though obviously the majority are female. I would just like to second the motion, please.
Thank you. And are there any questions or Councillor Della?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think this is a very powerful motion, and I'm very glad to support it. As a dad of two young girls who won't be allowed to date for many years, but that this is very poignant to me. There's been so much work that you've put into this, Neil, to get this right, and thank you to Jen for all your hard work and your passion and your champion of this, Neil. I think it should be commended. I firmly believe as public servants, yes, we should all be trained in this area so we can all support it. And the work the Dawn Project do is incredible. The only face-to-face service out there to support victims. And I look forward to us as a council supporting them further.
Thank you. We next go to Councillor Craig Reeves.
Good evening. As mentioned, I joined Councillor Franks in discussion. You got my name wrong there, though. It's Craig Reeves. He organised with the Wychavon housing team, and a domestic abuse survivor's journey relies on a wider service that is supported by ourselves, Worcestershire County Council, and a multitude of charities. My takeaway from that meeting is that the housing team do a fantastic job and work hard to help victims of domestic abuse, but the wider support around domestic abuse needs more resource and visibility. The Dawn Project, as mentioned, a domestic abuse charity here in Wychavon, are seeing their funding cut, and come March are facing choices that will be detrimental to those who may come to rely upon their future services. I believe that a wave of training, support and awareness promoted by this council will instil confidence to both charities and survivors of domestic abuse that we are, and albeit it sounds somewhat of an odd phrase, but as encouraged by Worcestershire Community Trust, to champion domestic abuse. So I very much support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jodie Arnold.
Hi there. Thank you very much for adding this to the agenda. I think it's very much needed. And thank you for addressing the fact that men also face domestic abuse. I've known, sadly, 2 people within my lifetime that have experienced domestic abuse separately, one being a man and one being a woman. So I know the challenges that men do face when coming forward about in this particular area. Can I just ask, though, why did you decide on the Women's Safety and Domestic Abuse Coordinator rather than something more inclusive, so that men feel like they can also come forward and use that service? That's my thought process here. It might put some men off, that particular wording.
Yeah, I mean, when I submitted this, obviously I have had some feedback since, including Councillor Wilkins as well. I think with the women's safety aspect, to me, it was more around the fact that I was having talking to women residents about that they didn't feel safe on the streets. And that was the primary sort of thought around women's safety, that aspect. So they're 2 sort of separate aspects to me. That you've got your women's safety aspect, that women want to feel safe on the streets and be able to go out at any time of the day or night and not have to worry about perpetrators out there. And then the domestic abuse sort of as a separate element where it was inclusive of all domestic abuse victims. But obviously, they are still very strongly linked. So that's kind of why I did go with that. We had a women's safety and domestic abuse coordinator. So it would be 2 sort of things that would be championed by the coordinator. So maybe I haven't quite got it perfectly right, and maybe there'll be a discussion around that but in future, and I'm happy to have that discussion. But that was me thinking whether I've quite got it right or wrong. Thank you.
Excellent. So now we have Councillor Emma Kersey.
Chairman, thank you, and thank you to Councillor Franks and Councillor Tucker for bringing this motion forward and doing all your research and speaking so eloquently on it. Very similar to Councillor Arnold, the thing that struck me with this is, and I would like to, if appropriate, propose an amendment to the motion to actually take away the word women so that it literally says safety and domestic abuse. And the reason why particularly that it struck me, for all the things that you've said about domestic abuse and all the things that you've come across in your findings, as far as male victims of domestic abuse, the only thing that's been in the press for anybody in that situation has been that as a result of the government's cuts, the only helpline for male domestic abused men is having to be closed because of the government cuts. So I think if that's the only message that's out there to men who, let's face it, are going to be less likely to come forward, a man is less likely to come forward. So I think I totally appreciate all of the sentiments with this and applaud everything that you've said, but I think I would be happier that it's very much inclusive, knowing that the only thing out there at the moment for men is something that's being closed down because of the government cuts. So I'd really like to see this. I very much support this, but I would very much like to see this to say safety and domestic abuse as opposed to for women.
Councillor Paul Middleborough.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's very timely to bring this at the moment. Just picking up on certain things that Councillor Kersey has said. The finances coming from the centre are changing. I think it's very disappointing that the Home Office have actually finally have cut the Safer Streets project, which has been primarily aimed at women and young girls within urban settings. I think that's one thing that we need to be aware of. Secondly, I do have some concerns with the changes in the West Mercia police arrangements, where the divisions are being taken down from 5 to 2, and I do worry that the Community Safety Partnership, which we are part of, which actually has played an important role helping to direct funds from the Police and Crime Commissioner in support of tackling abuse across, whether it's children, men, women of all ages. And I do hope that we can, as a council, make sure that that is not diluted for this council in any way. That being said, I mean, so there are so many people actually working on different issues to do with domestic abuse. And I think this does give an opportunity to bring some of those people together within the Wychavon context. And I think it's a thing, if we can get it going, we should be very proud of.
Thank you. I think it was Councillor Gregory Wilkins next, and then Councillor Judith Chiotti.
I wish to start by making it absolutely clear that this is a motion I wholeheartedly support. Domestic abuse must always stay as a major focus for both funding and support of any council nationwide. 1/3 of domestic abuse victims are males, and that is only the reported cases where the true number is likely much higher. This is due to the fact that men are far less likely to report any domestic abuse they suffer. I myself am a male survivor of domestic abuse as a child, and I personally know how critical it is that men are just as supported as women and encouraged to come forward. Everyone wants to feel safe at night, and fear is not exclusive to anyone. Support for all victims of domestic abuse is critical, but our support for men must never be sidelined in favour of this. I support the calls by both Councillor Kersey and Councillor... Why did that not show up? Sorry. And Councillor Arnold, sorry, I did write it down, we deleted it, and Councillor Arnold in calls for both an amendment to this motion and the renaming of the position. While it is unfortunate that this may be the case, the moment that you put women in a title of any position of this nature, it does make many men feel like it's not for them. And while that isn't the case, that is the perception of it, and I think we should attempt to avoid that where possible.
Councillor Wilkins, can you just clarify, are you seconding Councillor Kersey's proposal for an amendment?
Thank you. We next go to Councillor Judith Chiotti.
To the ideas of, thank you, changing the name, and I had another suggestion, which is to start with domestic abuse and women's safety coordinator. So the first thing you read is domestic abuse, which would apply to anybody, man or woman, and then the next would be about the safety of women on the streets. That was it.
As there's been an amendment proposed and seconded, we're going to go back to Councillor Neil Franks first, and then it'll be to Councillor Mark Googe afterwards.
Thank you. I've heard loud and clear, and I do appreciate the comments, and I actually do agree that I'm more than happy to have a change to the name. A suggestion's been made that we could, instead of saying women's safety, in both parts of the motion, we could say safer streets. And that would probably answer exactly what I would like to happen and exactly what my colleagues have also said.
Councillor Kersey, are you happy with that?
No, actually, I think as you have it at the moment, if we just remove the word women so that it says safety and domestic abuse, that will cover everything I think that we want it to cover. And the wonderful thing is the fact that we're actually having this debate to change the wording. If it means that one male victim comes forward as a result of us having this discussion, then we've done a good thing. So yeah, from my perspective, I think to encompass as much as we want to encompass, I think if we say safety and domestic abuse, would be encompass everything that we want to include.
Back to you, Neil.
I can understand what the council's saying, but my concern is that if you say safety, there's nothing left in there to talk about the safety on the streets, which is what the whole, when you say women's safety, you have women's safety charters, which is all about the safety on the streets and in parks and train stations and everywhere else. If we remove that aspect to just down to safety, we're missing a vital part of what the motion was trying to encompass. Therefore, is it possible to if we vote on one amendment, can we include a second one to ask councillors if they would be happier with safer streets?
No. So currently we have a proposal for an amendment on the table which has been seconded. So we need to talk to that proposed amendment first, and then we'll take a vote on that. If that is lost, we go back to the substantive, and then if anybody wants to make another amendment, they can do so at that stage. So at the moment, we have an amendment that's been proposed and seconded on the table. Does anybody have anything to say on the proposed amendment?
We'll go to Councillor Mark Googe first. And then we've got Councillor Dan Boatwright next. Is it on the amendment or is it on the substantive, on the original? Excellent, thank you.
I think this is on the amendment. Sorry about this. Well, thanks, Neil and Julie, for bringing this anyway. I do think this is a really important topic. Speaking as a man, I don't have any problem with the original wording, although I'm grateful to my female colleagues for their concern for my safety. I do feel that we are talking about two different things here. Domestic violence, which I think we've made clear is something that both men and women suffer from. Women more often, but men no less so in terms of the impact that it has on them. But I do think that we need to retain the focus on women's safety on the streets in this. I'm quite comfortable walking through the streets of Evesham at night, late at night. I don't feel in the slightest bit unsafe. But the only other people I see walking through Evesham late at night on the streets are other men. And if whatever the reasons for that, we need to be addressing that. If women are not walking home from the pub at night or walking home from the restaurant or walking or to or from wherever they're going because they don't feel safe on the streets, whereas I do, then there's something that we need to fix.
Next we have Councillor Dan Boatwright Green.
Thank you, Chair. And I wasn't planning on speaking to this. And I've got to be honest, I don't think I'm going to be as articulate as you, Councillor Wilkins, having similar experiences. The reason why I will support this amendment is because the men you see walking down the streets feel safe. Those men belong to particular groups, whereas other men do not feel safe and do not walk down those streets. And so, bearing in mind we have had, even in this town recently, experiences of the LGBT community who have been assaulted, and they don't feel safe on the streets, I do understand where we're coming from on this one. And actually, as much as I do think we do need to accelerate making sure that we are supporting women's safety, we also need to make sure that includes other groups as well. And so I think that this is a good compromise to make sure that we don't detract from the fact that we need to increase women's safety. But just because somebody looks like you and they're walking down the street doesn't mean there's not others who look like you who do not feel safe.
Next we go to Councillor Nick Dawkes.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to say I do agree with Councillor Googe, but this is titled a domestic abuse support motion, not a safer streets. And I think we're confusing two very different things. And I'd just like to say that thankfully I have a limited experience of domestic abuse, but the experience I have had is horrible, and it's been 50-50 male and female. And I think if we're going to have a domestic abuse coordinator, it cannot have any limit to sex in it. It's got to be across the board. And so I agree with the motion to amend as it is. Thank you.
Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the most important thing for me is, given the seriousness of this motion and the importance of it, is that we're all in agreement about what comes forward. Because, and perhaps I've got a slightly different view of it for the fact that Councillor Franks and I had quite a long discussion, I think it's fair to say, at a meeting over in Droitwich last week. And this is an incredibly important motion that's gone through a lot of work to get it to the stage it's at today. I know that, yeah, there's been numerous discussions with numerous councillors and numerous officers to get it to where it is. And ultimately, the most important thing is that we're all working in unison and supporting the same thing. I agree with the premise about the coordinator role being gender neutral. But I think that the point that Councillor Franks makes, and I think the overall motion was aimed towards the safety of women, with domestic abuse being the prominent factor within it. But it takes us back to, we had a discussion over in Droitwich with Councillor Morrison and both Councillor Morrises, myself and Councillor Franks, where we were talking about women's safety on the streets. And Councillor Morrison and one of our officers from the Parks team said, as men, we'll never understand. We'll never understand what it's like to walk down the road and not have to take one headphone out because you don't want to risk not being able to hear who's behind you, or having to plan your route to ensure that you're not going down a dark road because you can't risk it. As a man, that's not something in day-to-day that you necessarily experience in the same way that a woman does. And that part, I completely agree, that the designation is towards women. It's about making sure that women feel safe on the streets, because the issues that are faced by women are completely different in that aspect to those faced by men. As far as domestic abuse is concerned, I completely agree. It's gender neutral and we need to support both. Ultimately, I'd like us to all support whatever amendment comes forward in unison and get behind it, so it's a unanimous vote. But I do agree that there is an important aspect of ensuring that the safety and walking down the streets and that aspect is tailored towards women, because it is the way that we deal with it does need to be different. But in terms of domestic abuse, fully agree, removal of the word woman and making it gender neutral. Thank you, Chairman.
So, I've seen Councillor Wilkins' hand go up, but has already spoken in this debate, so we go next to Councillor Richard Morris.
Thank you, Chairman. The name on it I will leave to people that have better knowledge on the pickup and what goes. I do thank Councillor Franks and Councillor Tucker for bringing it forward. It's immensely important. I do believe that Dr McNally, the Director of Public Health, is probably watching, because she'd sent me an email. So the Public Health are investing £1.5 million per year into domestic abuse support. This includes counselling and support for those experiencing abuse. It will also include face-to-face support via an extension of funding. We also fund training, secure accommodation support, a lived experience group, and dedicated housing officers. Services are available for both men as well as women.
We go next to Councillor Angie Crump.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for this debate that's going tonight regarding this. Two factors that are very close to my heart. I feel that we're talking about two very, very different things here. I think the domestic abuse side is one factor. The safety of women and men on the streets is very much another. So should be two separate areas that we're talking about, rather than trying to put them all under one roof. I've had dealings with the Dawn project. We did a big fundraiser with them last year, and it was a fashion show I did, and during that fashion show, the amount of women that came up to me and told me that they had been domestically abused, I was quite surprised. And it's not all physical. People always sort of think, oh, it's all physical. Mental abuse is far worse than physical sometimes, because it's something you haven't got anything to show for it as well. But I certainly think, maybe are we actually looking at two very different subjects, and should we be, is this why we're all struggling with it? Just thought.
Councillor Beverley Hardman.
I agree with everything. It's very important, this, and I think you're right about the two separate criteria. So just quickly, street issues also affect children, and we haven't mentioned children at all tonight. And I know that I've been attacked on the street and it's been very frightening, but I think we need to make it for the public and make it separate from the domestic abuse.
Councillor Neil Franks, and then we'll go back to Councillor Emma Kersey to wrap up on the amendment before we vote.
I understand what people are saying, but I would say these two things are extremely heavily linked, harassment, etc., can very much be what happens on the streets as well. So what I'm asking basically is that this amendment is voted down by councillors, and then we move straight away to another amendment which just includes safer streets, and that will answer the gender neutral aspect and allow us to start building safer streets and domestic abuse support. Thank you.
Before we go back to Councillor Kersey for wrapping up the amendment, I'm going to make one slight suggestion in wording on your suggestion there, that rather than safer streets, personal safety and domestic abuse officer, because it sounds like the safety aspect is within or without of the home, and there's no mention to safer streets within your actual motion. So that would be my recommendation if it would interest you, and if it would solve the argument that many in the room seem to be having as to whether this motion is about the streets or not. Personal safety and domestic abuse officer.
As long as when it moves forward out after this, that it does very much include safety on the streets, then yes, I would be fine with that.
Because I think that's the thing, is personal safety affects people wherever they are. So to Councillor Emma Kersey to wrap up before we vote on the amendment.
Chairman, thank you. I think we all want to actually achieve the same thing, and I think it's the way to get to that conclusion. In the actual motion, it doesn't say streets once, so we're probably trying to throw too much into this, which ultimately will end up in dilution, which I'm sure none of us want. So personal safety and domestic abuse definitely fits the bill. My concern is that if we say safer streets, it doesn't grab attention. It goes down the line of antisocial behaviour and all that sort of thing. So I think personal safety and domestic abuse, or safety and domestic abuse, but we need to attract, excuse the wrong word, those people, that the victims that we want to attract to this scheme and publicise that. And I think if we say safer streets, it goes down a completely different route. And as Councillor Crump said, absolutely there may be a call to bring another motion forward at the next council to cover all of those things that everybody's discussed. But I think to encompass everything that we've heard so passionately tonight, it does need to not have streets in there. It needs to be safety and domestic abuse, or personal safety and domestic abuse, which will encompass everybody's concerns.
So before we go to the vote, you've just said you'd be happy with personal safety and domestic abuse. Am I right in thinking you'd said the same, Neil? So in that case, it sounds like we're happy.
So if Councillor Kersey and Councillor Wilkins, are you willing to withdraw your proposal for an amendment? So Councillor Franks, can you sum up what your actual proposal is? And then if Councillor Tucker is happy to second that, we will go to the vote on that being the substantive.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, the motion does talk about that, in fact, I'll read it out, that all women and girls have an absolute right to feel safe wherever they are. And that does mean on the streets, in parks, wherever they are, basically. So it does include that aspect, essentially. And if we change to personal safety, that's fine with me, as long as it does include that women and girls can go anywhere they want and feel safe at any time of the day or night. And that is intrinsically linked with domestic abuse, because domestic abuse doesn't just happen in the house. It will happen at work, it will happen on the streets. Therefore, the two are absolutely linked. They are not separate issues. I understand why people are seeing them as separate issues, but when you do the training, you find out that domestic abuse happens everywhere, and it is vital that we tackle it at every aspect. Thank you.
I fully support where you're coming from, but we've been on this a while and we do need to move on. Can you read out what your motion will be, hopefully taking into account that change in the primary wording of the officer role?
That everyone has an absolute right to feel safe wherever they are, and that they will not...
Councillor Franks, this, to be specific, in your motion, where it says this council resolves to, and then from there, the primary wording change that everyone seemed to be happy with being on the coordinator's role, that word change. If you're happy to read out from there.
This council resolves to ask officers to develop a proposal for dedicated staff capacity, including, as needed, the creation of a new personal safety and domestic abuse coordinator role within the council, and with the responsibility to develop a Wychavon personal safety and domestic abuse strategy. This would involve working with partners, elected members and our communities with funding around training, projects and events, and ensure there is long-term funding for the Dawn project, continue with the promise to increase temporary accommodation to ensure it meets the needs of domestic abuse victims, create a personal safety charter for Wychavon, fund and roll out the Worcestershire Community Trust Domestic Abuse Champions training to Wychavon District and Parish Councillors.
That's grand, thank you. And to confirm, Councillor Julie Tucker, are you still happy to second?
Yes, I will.
Wonderful. Could we have all those in favour? And that is happily unanimous. Deeply sorry, Councillor Charles Tucker. One abstention. Thank you. Okay, so this takes us on to item 9, reports to council, starting with recommendations from the executive board. So this we start with the local development plan scheme to Councillor Paul Middleborough.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to say that the planning team has answered nearly 400 questions that the inspectors have put to them since the 1st of January this year. This means that the inspection is rolling in earnest. Hearing sessions will commence at 9:30 on Tuesday the 4th of March within the Worcester Guildhall in the High Street, and the hearings are scheduled to take place over a 4-week period, with weeks 1 and 3 held at the Guildhall. Week 4 could well be held within the council chamber here. You will be able, if you wish to, observe what's going on, attend in person, or perhaps more conveniently, to go on to the inspectorate's website and watch the proceedings live. So I'm pleased to move the recommendation. And I'd also like to thank all of the staff within planning, not just those who've been putting the development plan together, but the staff throughout the planning department whose workload has been made that much harder by those who are having to do the work on the development plan.
Thank you, and I believe we have a seconder, Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you very much, Chairman. More than happy to second, and I'll just re-emphasise Councillor Middleborough's thanks to all the officers involved who have worked tirelessly to get all this information sorted and by the deadline. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This takes us to the next part of the... apologies. All those in favour? Any against? And any abstentions?
That's clearly carried, Chair.
That's carried, thank you. The next two parts of this item need no approval, and we go on to the fourth part of this item, the capital strategy, proposed by Councillor Aaron Powell.
Thank you, Chair. This strategy, as members will be aware, is an annual requirement that we are required to adopt that spells out the principles of how we will spend capital investment and also how we would go about borrowing if we had a need for some. And of course, this council is in the enviable position that we do not have a requirement for borrowing, so that element is not relevant for us. The strategy is largely unchanged from previous years, except that it does this year spell out 4 key priorities, which we believe are game changers for Wychavon. And it demonstrates that we will support investment in the Evesham Riverside Centre, the Raven in Droitwich, the Lido at Droitwich, and Worcestershire Parkway as key priorities to deliver future capital strategy investment across the district, and I commend it to the council.
Thank you, and I believe we have a seconder, Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Chairman. In the interest of time, I'm very happy to second all of that. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we have a comment from Councillor Gregory Wilkins.
I am extremely happy that we are not only making real progress with the Raven, but it has been specifically mentioned as a priority in this strategy. I would, however, like to ask the leader to work with me to create a press release to inform the public of our progress, as well as point them to the extremely helpful FAQ page that our officers have made. In a similar vein, I'd like to ask that some simple signage be put up on the Raven scaffolding with QR codes and links to the FAQ page so that any residents can find their way there, and this is to help residents stay informed and know what's going on.
Thank you. Back to Councillor Day.
Thank you, and I'm pleased that Councillor Wilkins is happy at this point about the Raven. That's always a pretty high bar, but I think I'm pleased that we are there. And I'm pleased also for his persistence in raising it as an issue. I'm pleased also to say that the officers, in their normal, timely way, have moved forward rapidly, and I can produce indeed the very item that he's requested, which does have a QR code, which does work and goes straight through to the frequently asked questions. This item will be up on the Raven as soon as we can possibly get it in place. Thank you.
Wychavon working with excellent speed, and I assume that means you're happy still going ahead with that motion with those comments. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And we go next on to the Treasury Management Strategy, proposed by Councillor Aaron Powell again.
Thank you, Chair. So the Treasury Management Strategy is another of our annual requirements. This spells out the performance measures that we will use and the potential indicators that we will use to measure the success or otherwise of our investments. I'm pleased to say, as councillors will know, that our investment team have been very successful in managing our investments extremely well and securing a very good return for the council. And so I'm delighted to propose this strategy. There is very little change from previous years. It does spell out specifically where we will invest our monies, and there is a minor change to where we will be making our investments, or where we have the opportunity to make our investments, I should say. But other than that, there is no fundamental change to the strategy.
And I believe we have a seconder.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to second this very technical but important report.
Any questions before we go to the vote? I see no hands. So can I have all those in favour? And that's unanimous again. And now we go to the Capital Parks budgets, proposed by Councillor Beverley Hardman.
I hope you all will support this. This is for money for the capital programme of £250,000 for the parks and public open spaces, which will mean that any project under £50,000 will not go to the exec board for the work to be carried out. However, the Capital Project Board will oversee the projects and update the board where appropriate. This will allow the parks to act quickly and put money into the areas that need to be put into our lovely parks. As you know, we win lots of awards in these parks and they've done a fantastic job, so I hope you support this.
Thank you. And Councillor Birch to second.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just a procedural thing, really, to get rid of some unnecessary bureaucracy, so more than happy to second. Thank you very much.
Happy days. And I believe we have a question from Councillor Jodie Arnold.
Hi there. It's more of a statement, really. I'm really, really pleased to see this within the agenda. I fully support this, but what I would love to see going forward is us doing more, pushing it forward, so more parks. So with the increase in our population, making our parks local again, as opposed to having to travel to our local parks. So I'd love to see new park creation on our agenda at some point as well.
Always happy to have a new park I can take the dog to. Could we have all those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. And next we go on to item 10, the We Are Wychavon plan update. This is proposed by Councillor Chris Day.
Thank you, Chairman. This update is really to do with the issue of empty homes. Doing a short bit of research on this this afternoon, I found that there are somewhere between 1.5 million and 1 million empty homes in the UK, depending upon how you assess that. Some of those are second homes, but not many actually, only about 10%. So there's quite a big target of empty homes to look at. And the 1.5 million figure is significant because 1.5 million just so happens to be the target that this government has set itself to build over 5 years. So we have 1.5 million homes that are sitting around empty, and we're trying to build another 1.5 million in 5 years. You can probably figure out why that seems strange yourselves. So we're very pleased to announce that we are looking to progress further with our empty homes work here in Wychavon to seek out those homes and to try and bring them back to life. And with that, I'm happy to propose this item. Thank you.
Thank you. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Della.
Thank you, Chair. I said this exec board, if you haven't met our empty homes officer, please do. If you've got one in your area, she is so proactive. Initially, this was set as a one-year promise, but now we're looking. Now we have a database set up, a methodology for prioritising properties based on risk, and we're just about to go live with our strategy very shortly. Our officer has carried out over 70 site visits in the first 2 quarters and has intervened, bringing 7 properties back into use already, without having to resort to enforcement action. The new promise is now set to deliver on the preparatory work and to bring more properties back into use, which I think we'd all agree is a good thing. I think we're aiming to bring another 30 back to life, and this is based on the success we've had over the first 6 months. So, and continue to work without enforcement action, but with a proactive approach. I am very happy to second.
Thank you. And I believe we have a question from Councillor Angie Crump.
Again, it's not a question, it's more of a statement of thanks to Sherry and her team on the We Are Wychavon and how amazing the actual new report is and how much easier it is to use. As part of the ONS committee, I just wanted to say that thank you on our behalf. It has made a huge difference to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Craig Reeves.
Yeah, just to say, I've got very recent experience of this within my ward. An empty home left vacant for over a decade, and I'd like to thank Anne-Marie Bishop, who's our empty homes officer. She resolved this issue for the residents and the adjoining home, which was suffering issues as a result of that neglect. So it's been very well received by all within my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liz Tucker.
I just wanted to say that I find that the target of 30 to be somewhat unambitious, and I can't understand why we can't have more ambitious targets. I know that one of the things that leads to Wychavon's many successes is that it sets itself easy targets. I'd like to see a more challenging target on empty homes.
I think realism or realistic is a word I'd prefer to easy there, especially a scheme in its very first iteration. Councillor Della.
Yeah, I think easy is a bit of an understatement, really. I think it's a bit harsh on the work that goes into doing this, isn't it? They are very complex cases, and like I said, we're trying to do this without enforcement action. If we have to go down the EDMO route, it would take forever to do. So I wouldn't say it's an unambitious target. I think if we brought 30 empty properties back into use, it would be an incredible achievement.
Can somebody remind me how many we have in Wychavon?
I've not got that to hand. I can, Jen, do you have that?
Off the top of my head, I can give you a rough number, but I can provide you with the correct number following the meeting. Off the top of my head, it's around 560 at last count.
So it's going to take an awful lot of years to sort that out, isn't it?
As experience and progress builds, so do momentum. So, we go to the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous, thank you. Next we go to item 11, the 2025-2026 budget and money plan. This being proposed by Councillor Aaron Powell.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm proud to be able to submit this budget to Council for approval this evening. One might, in ordinary times, expect that the report on how we're going to spend £13.5 million across the coming year would be the most substantive item on our agenda this evening. But in light of the important discussions we've already had, and I think further important discussions to come, I suspect this evening it might not be. This budget is sound, it is fair, it promotes investment, and it's collaborative. It's sound because it is based on prudent assumptions, as confirmed in the Deputy Chief Executive's report, which is contained within the papers. And I should say my thanks to Jane Pickering and to Alex Mason and their respective teams for the hard work they have put in over many months, creating this budget and getting us to where we are today. It is these prudent assumptions in this budget that allow us to safeguard the excellent services that we are rightly proud of here in Wychavon. This budget recognises the challenges we face, including, for example, the shortfall in the support from government in terms of the increased costs of employers' national insurance, but it also seizes the opportunities where they exist. This budget is fair. It proposes setting a 2.5% council tax increase for Wychavon. That continues the long tradition of this council only increasing council tax where it is strictly necessary. And that in itself speaks to the long history of good management of our finances by this council. Those of you who've watched the inflation figures will know that inflation is now 3%. So in principle, a 2.5% increase is actually a cut in real terms against inflation figures. And that is testament to the sound financial management of this council over many, many years. This budget promotes investment. It builds on the capital strategy that we've already approved and provides provision in the capital programme for investment in Evesham Riverside Centre, for investment in Droitwich Leisure Centres, for the Lido, and for investment in our railway stations to continue ensuring that our residents have the services that they need within this district. And importantly, this budget is collaborative. It takes on board the recommendations of our budget scrutiny group, and my thanks to all those members who participated in the many meetings of that scrutiny group. Not only does it take on board their recommendations, it enhances those recommendations, particularly in respect of wildlife and woodlands, creating more wildlife and woodlands, not quite parks, but we're getting there, and also in respect of fly tipping. I therefore hope that it is a budget that all members of this council can be proud of, and that all members of this council can support this evening. So I will shortly move the recommendations at 2.1 in the agenda pack to agree the revenue budgets, to agree our fees and charges, to agree the report of the Deputy Chief Executive, and to establish our capital programme for the coming years. But before I do that, I do have one announcement to make. And that is to say that as a result of identifying underspends in this year, I'm delighted to be able to say that we will fund each parish and town council to the sum of £250 to support their celebrations that they may wish to hold in May of this year to support the 80th anniversary of VE Day. In addition to that, we will waive any charges associated with road closures to enable parish councils to have and support events within their parishes. This is an important day of remembrance and celebration of peace, and that's particularly important in light of the ongoing conflict around the world, especially in Europe. That's a total sum of £19,000 that will be taken from savings this year and carried forward into next year in order to support those important celebrations, and I hope all members will support me in enabling that to happen. With that, Chair, I move the recommendations and I move that we support the budget.
A grand idea. I believe we have a seconder. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. I would just want to add my thanks to Councillor Powell for seeing through the budget process with a great deal of professionalism and care. And I don't think there's anything that I would wish to add at this stage, so I'll just second and reserve my right to say anything later.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Boatwright Green.
Feel already uncomfortable already. There is a dogmatic approach to budgets when in opposition. Oppose the budget. Or at least amend the budget if there is something you think needs adding or developing. Personally, I feel there are areas I'd want to see developed and areas where I'd want more money spent. And in a couple of cases, areas where actually I'd want to see money reduced. So we've had a series of discussions with council officers over the past few weeks, and the key issue here is a lot of what we as Liberal Democrats have already been pushing for, we can see. These areas have been highlighted during the scrutiny process. And so I have to say a huge thank you to everyone who's been involved in that process and to those who have listened. And now I need to explain why this budget has my support. Firstly, it's balanced, properly, not using technicalities that those of us with a maths background do not consider valid. There is an increase in funding for exploring temporary accommodation for those that are homeless, increasing in flood resilience, and there's also the start of looking at the next round of where we might be able to produce private housing where we need to. There is also an increase in funding for nature, and I've even seen that there's funding for mentoring schemes from those for poorer backgrounds for social mobility. The influence we as Liberal Democrats have had on the budget process this year is evident. We can obviously argue it isn't enough. We'll argue that anyway. So I welcome these increases in the budget and areas we care about as a group. That's not to say you'll have an easy ride. Councillor Powell, you already know I have an eye on funding for health initiatives. I know that members of my group will be pushing for greater finances dedicated for things like flood management, while others have plans for new green spaces, which have already been very much highlighted, and others want to see a big push in affordable and social housing. So 2026 will be another budget round with Liberal Democrats very much getting their point across. It will also have more meaning as we start to understand where we are in terms of reorganisation. And adding an amendment at this stage and at this point in the process feels a little bit premature. So I understand the theory of adding an amendment to the budget to show the differences between parties, but given we've actually been listened to, I can't see a true benefit to the residents I represent. I agree, this is a fair budget. This is very different from the speech I gave at County Hall a couple of weeks ago, for the very reason is that I have been listened to. Please do not assume that means that I'm going soft, and if I'm not listened to next year, buckle up and brace for impact because we will return to normal service.
Thank you. Is there any further comments around the room? Everyone looking happy. This is a named vote. So all those in favour? Oh, pardon me there, over to Misha for the named vote.
So the budget is a named vote, and so I will call out your name if you can indicate how you're voting by saying for, against or abstain. Councillor Arnold. For. Councillor Birch. For. Councillor Boatwright Green.
I feel a tad sick. For.
Councillor Bowden.
For.
Councillor Ciotti. Councillor Crump. Councillor Dawkes.
For.
Councillor Day.
For.
Councillor Della.
For.
Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Dyke.
For.
Councillor Franks.
For.
Councillor Googe.
For.
Councillor Grady. Councillor Beverley Hardman.
For.
Councillor Herdman.
For.
Councillor Kersey. Councillor Knight.
For.
Councillor Middleborough.
For.
Councillor N. Morris.
For.
Councillor R. Morris.
For.
Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Raphael.
For.
Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Robinson. Councillor Robson.
For.
Councillor Rowley.
For.
Councillor Sims. Councillor Stokes. Councillor Charles Tucker. Councillor Liz Tucker. Councillor Julie Tucker.
For.
Councillor Trourier.
For.
Councillor Ward. Councillor Wilkins. Councillor Wright. Unanimous.
That is happily unanimous. So we go next on to, as previously mentioned, item 13 will come before item 12. So we go next on to item 13, Council Tax 2025-2026, formal resolution. This is again proposed by Councillor Aaron Powell.
Thank you, Chair. I shall keep my comments on this brief because this motion is really a technical motion that takes that budget that we have just approved and effectively divides it and divides that 2.5% council tax increase across the various parishes and towns that make up our district to specify the formal council tax that each of those areas will pay, taking into account both the Wychavon district budget, but also the county council budget and the precepts from the police and crime commissioner and the fire authority to give us a final council tax figure. And with that, I move the formal resolution.
Thank you, and I believe we have a seconder. Who was seconding? Was that Councillor Day again?
Happy to second, Chair.
Any questions? Seeing no hands, we go to the vote, which will be another named vote.
So council tax setting is a named vote. So again, members, I'll call out your name if you can indicate how you're voting by saying for, against or abstain. Councillor Arnold. For. Councillor Birch. For. Councillor Boatwright Green.
For.
Councillor Belden.
For.
Councillor Sciotti. For. Councillor Crump. For. Councillor Dawkes. Councillor Day.
For.
Councillor Della. For. Councillor Duffy.
For.
Councillor Dyke. Oh, who's that? Councillor Franks. For. Councillor Googe.
For.
Councillor Grady. For. Councillor Beverley Hardman. For. Councillor Herdman. For. Councillor Kersey. For. Councillor Knight. For. Councillor Middleborough. For. Councillor Morris. For. Oh, sorry, Councillor Nicola Morris. For. Councillor Richard Morris. For. Councillor Powell.
For.
Councillor Raphael. For. Councillor Reeves.
For.
Councillor Robinson. Councillor Robson. For. Councillor Rowley. For. Councillor Sims. For. Councillor Stokes. For. Councillor Charles Tucker. For. Councillor Liz Tucker. For. Councillor Julie Tucker. For. Councillor Tourier. For. Councillor Ward. And Councillor Wilkins. For. And Councillor Wright. For. So that vote is carried for 30 votes.
Excellent.
Oh, no, sorry, 35.
So I believe that again is unanimous of those in the room. Excellent. So that carries, and we go next on to the previously item 12, the devolution and local government reorganisation. I believe this is proposed by Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chair. I take it that all councillors will probably have had a chance to look through item 12 and the paper that was prepared by Vic Allison, which I think lays out what a lot of us already know, and that is that devolution is definitely coming, and attached to it is the rise of the unitary authority. Devolution is being introduced because the Labour government believes that it will be helpful if you could get in one room all 31 or so people who will run the mayoral combined authorities across the country, and they see that as a way of providing better growth primarily, and also better strategic planning. The cost of doing that, I think, from their point of view, is that they need to eliminate one tier of government because they've effectively created a new one by having these mayoral combined authorities, and their way of doing that is to create unitary authorities across the rest of the country where unitaries do not already exist. And it's worth bearing in mind that unitaries do exist for half of British citizens already. So what is really happening here is it's the shire counties, the ones that have not to this date decided to convert over, they are being forced at this point to become part of a unitary authority. And there are, of course, benefits to being unitary. There is simplification. It means that you know who to talk to because there's only one councillor looking after whatever it is you're talking about. But there are also risks. And for me, the biggest risk is that there is no longer a watertight piece of funding that sits around what we do as districts. The districts only cost 14% of what's being spent in Worcestershire at the moment. The rest is being spent by the county council. But I would argue that that 14% goes a very long way. And as we've heard this evening, it affects all sorts of lives in different ways. The services that we do are just as essential. Unfortunately, It is also my belief that with the cuckoo in the nest of social care, adult social care, children's social care, SEND funding, it's quite likely that those funds in a unitary authority will be squashed. In other words, the bit that we currently have is going to potentially diminish. And I've put that in the motion that I've got because I think it is the key risk that is out there, basically. And it's not been answered because it's a very difficult question to answer. But it did disappoint me, I have to say, to find that Wes Streeting announced that there would be a social care review, that it would only be done in about another 3 years' time. So by 2028, we'll actually get the result of that review in terms of what will happen with social care. That being said, where we are tonight is that we've had a letter. I say we, all of us who are leaders in Worcestershire, have had a letter from Jim McMahon MP on the 5th of February, inviting us to get together and talk to each other about what is the right way of setting up a unitary authority in Worcestershire. And in the meetings that we've had so far, only really two thoughts have come forward. One is that you have a unitary authority that has the same footprint as the current county, and you'd call that a one Worcestershire, I suppose, authority. And the other one is that you would perhaps have an authority that is what I would describe as north and south, the north being Wyre Forest, Bromsgrove and Redditch, and the south being ourselves, Malvern Hills and Worcester City. Now, if you read the white paper, it has in it a clear request, and that is that if you're forming a unitary authority now, you try and make it of a size greater than 500,000 people, 500,000 residents. And you will all know that that doesn't happen in Worcestershire unless you have the one Worcestershire footprint. And I think primarily for that reason, the County Council has said that it is supporting a one Worcestershire solution. It sees that as being the only one that is compliant, and I can understand their thinking on that. There are, of course, reasons for saying that that something smaller would be better. People do hold that view, and if you watched the proceedings, as I did from Malvern Hills yesterday, that's the view that's emerged so far from them as a preference. It's also the view that's emerged from Worcester City as a preference, that they would have a southerly sort of combination with ourselves. And now it's our turn to say what we think might be the preference. And I've put forward a motion where I'm suggesting that, in my case at least, there is a strong reason for saying that the one Worcestershire Unitary Authority would be my preferred view, with the knowledge of the data that I've got to hand currently, and knowing as well about the 500,000 limit. In fact, I have said, I think it's very difficult to say that there's any other show in town based on those two things, although of course there is, because I think there is the possibility that the 500,000 limit may be reduced a bit. And there is, of course, the fact that most of the unitaries that exist in the UK today are smaller than 250,000. All of the London boroughs, you know, that you can, many other places, Herefordshire, under 200,000, but some are bigger. Nevertheless, the government said 500,000, that's the limit, therefore that's what we should be going for. So, the question tonight, and I think what I wanted to hear from everybody in the chamber about who wants to speak on it is, are there any other combinations that you think should be investigated other than the two that we've got in this motion already? Because if there are, then we need to put that case forward to the other 6 leaders and suggest that they look at it. Such a combination would have to consider just a single district, because a district is the smallest building block of Lego that you can play in this particular game. So you could say, for example, you believe that maybe the district that sits in Stratford should join us. Why not? You know, have that district as part of a wider Worcestershire for reasons that you might want to put forward, or maybe a part of Gloucestershire. I mean, looking at the faces that are staring back at me, I think these ideas might not be coming forward in the next 5 minutes, but I just thought I'd throw it out there. That is what we need to do. We need to sort of figure out what are we prepared to run with. I'm suggesting just these two. And as I've said, my strong preference is currently the one unitary. And there are lots of straightforward reasons for it. One is scale. There is something about having more scale and making for lower cost. The other one is the huge cost of change. So because we've currently got that footprint for a lot of the big services, whether it's roads and highways, whether it's social care and so on, if you imagine your job on, the 1st of April 2028 is that you're going to suddenly start to split those two things into two new authorities. Firstly, you've got all the data conversion to do. You've got to set up a new set of systems. You've got to go and hire new people who will run all of those functions. That's very difficult currently. You try recruiting somebody who's going to look after either adult or children's social care in a small unitary authority. You'll find it tough. So there will be those costs that you'll have to build in to your business case right from the start. I think that's going to be difficult. I think there are implications for place and inward investment. I mean, to my mind, if I was a business moving out of London and I was thinking of coming up here, do I really want to talk to North and South Worcestershire? Or do I just want to talk to Worcestershire? I want to talk to somebody, but I'd like it to be simple. And I don't even know where North and South Worcestershire are yet because they haven't been formed. There is then, I think, the issue for our staff. Now, clearly, I think for many of our staff, they would feel more comfortable, I think, with the South Worcestershire unitary, because that's closer to what they've seen. We've worked well with our colleagues in terms of developing the SWDPR, and they know each other. And, why wouldn't that be a sensible way forward for them? But there is also the argument that for many junior staff, being in a wider authority, a bigger authority, will give them more job opportunities. The counter to that is obviously that if you're at the top end of the structure, you are looking at some job losses and some consolidation, and that's something that we shouldn't shy away from. I actually think that having a single Worcestershire would make it a stronger mayoral combined authority unit. In other words, so when you talk to the mayor for your region, do you want to have a north and a south voice? And they may be different political parties, so they may have different views. Is that going to be a stronger solution for this area, or would it be better actually to have one political party sort of giving a single view for Worcestershire? And lastly, and this is one that I've talked about quite a bit with our colleagues, in particular Lynn Denham, the leader of Worcestershire, I personally feel, and I know she's very passionate about Worcester City, but I personally feel that Worcester City is actually stronger by being part of a bigger county rather than a county that's been chopped in half. I like Worcester City just as much as anybody else. I think it's an amazing place, and I want to see it sort of continue to have that strong visible look. So for all of those reasons, I've backed it. There's one other which I'll add, and that is that PwC have been commissioned to do a report to look at the finances that lie behind this. We've been given, the leaders, a quick preview of what that looks like, and it is strongly in favour of the one unitary solution, simply because it just makes much more financial sense. That said, we have asked, and we will make sure that this happens, all those figures need to be run past our own finance officers and for them to challenge and kick the tyres on them so that we actually know whether or not they are a true and fair view of what's going on here. In preparing the motion, though, I do recognise that there will be views in this chamber that will say we should look at the Southern Partnership, and I've tried to lay out what I consider to be some of the arguments in favour of it. It would involve a smaller chamber. So you'd have perhaps 60 councillors rather than the probably 114 that you'll have in a one Worcestershire unitary. I think it might mean that we could be more heavily influenced by our neighbours in a way that's positive. So if you're in the northern part, you'll form a stronger bond with Birmingham, I guess. If you're in our area, you'll have the freedom perhaps to have a stronger bond with Gloucestershire, Cheltenham and so on. There is connectivity there to be talked about. And other people argue that the things that I've talked about as being key challenges would go away if you ran them together. So take social care, take highways. Why wouldn't you run those two across the two authorities as a single item? You could do it, but I think you'd be faced with a political challenge there. I mean, supposing you've got one party in the north saying they want to do something radical about highways and really cut the spending of it, and the group in the south say, no, they want to have highways increase its spending. How do you resolve that? You're just basically giving yourself a new problem, and you're making it harder, I think, for residents to have a clear vote on what it is that they will get. They don't have that certainty if they're in fact reliant on a shared service, on something as key as that. So those are the thoughts that I had. I'm therefore proposing the motion as it's described, and this is basically answering the point that's in the paper, which says that we need to pursue a preference, if you like, so that we can be clear about where it is that we are headed. But we will, with this motion, still be looking at the two key options. All right, I think that's plenty from me. Thank you.
I believe we have a seconder.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you. We'll go first to Councillor Dan Boatwright Green.
First of all, I just want to make a point here that this document was sent called Extra Papers for tonight's meeting at 12:15 today. I was at a funeral in North Wales, so I'm not entirely sure when you would think I would have time to read this. So at 5:45 p.m, I had this thrust into my hands by my group, who then were trying to work out what they wanted to do. This is not an acceptable way to ask us to think about how our council will change and how our county will change. In fact, it immediately makes you want to react. What I can do is go with my initial thoughts on the back of what's in front of me. First of all, I don't know is the answer, because very simply, your PwC document that you have, we have not seen. And what I can say is there are no numbers or figures in front of me to prove to me or demonstrate to me what the options are. You can shake your head all you like, that is the facts. I know our council tax will go up. It wasn't you, Chris. Our council tax will go up. It will. Wychavon's will. If you compare our council tax to other areas, it's going to go up. And we need to think about how that actually impacts all of us. We've been told, we've been in the same meeting, Chris, to be creative, and there are exceptions to the 500,000. So maybe we need to look at that. I don't believe 6 unitaries across 6 district patterns is a good idea. I don't know if we want to work across county, because at this point, no one has given me any data, any figures, any facts. They've given me their thoughts and feelings and opinions. I know for a fact that there is no evidence that reorganisation cuts costs and saves money, because I only need to look at the costs of council tax in unitaries to know that it's far more. I also just need to look at 2022's reorganisation to know how much trouble they've had reorganising. This idea that every single piece of research will save us money, there's not a single piece of academic research that shows that we will save money, at least in the medium term. We also have to think about, we have joint services as a district, maybe we could have joint services as a unitary. There's also this argument that people won't know the difference between north and south. Well, we know what a Wychavon is because it's been around for 50 years. Outside of Worcestershire, yes, it is a little bit harder to argue that people know what a Wychavon is. But generally speaking, in this county, people know who we are. Also, businesses know who we are, because we actually have a relatively good relationship with our business community. And so this argument that north and south, they won't understand the geography, as a former geography teacher, I can say I can help you with that. In terms of a regional mayor, why would smaller unitaries want to work with a larger council? Why they could be overwhelmed by a larger voice? Because you've literally just made that argument that we'd then be all together and have a unified voice. If you look at our geography, we have some smaller partners right next door to us. Maybe they'd feel better with a north and south. But again, with all of this, the simple question or simple answer to the question is, I don't know right now because no one's put any figures in front of me. And so I'm not voting for this because I don't know. At this point, you can't prove to me that the one unitary is right. So you do not have my support.
Councillor Dan Birch. Sorry, Councillor Emma Stokes first, then Dan Birch.
Yeah, thank you. Firstly, this letter that the leaders of the council received on the 5th of February is significantly different than the one that the county council received in December. It clearly stated in December that thou shalt have one unitary and you'll have it and you need to put in your bid by the 10th of January. That being so, we did that and we were under obligations to do so. We had no choice and you were very briefly engaged with that process. What has happened now is the McMahon's, or whatever his name is, minister, has come up with a lovely little ruse of playing politics with the local shires. He knows that his leaders in the likes of some of the counties, some of the districts in this particular area will play political mischief because they've just got leadership. They will not have it long wrong if it turns into a one Worcestershire. So the Minister is playing politics with our residents, which I cannot agree with in any way, shape or form. However, what I do agree with is a one unitary is a particularly good mechanism to meet all the services for all our residents, irrespective of what that service is. We are aware that there are some of the service sectors, you know, the children's services and adult social care, that caters for everybody in Worcestershire. To disaggregate that over two unitaries of smaller sizes would be impossible. And if you were to disaggregate that into two smaller authorities, you would disadvantage possibly one area at the advantage of the other. That is not allowable. We are now in a process of putting PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are the leading academics on this, and they have a professional capacity. And to say that you're not sure of the truth on their report, as you have had access to it, is absolutely absurd. Of course, there is truth to the data. You must not ever say that there isn't. Your Section 151s will be interrogating that data, and as a Section 151 officer, they are intently looking at the cost advantages. And so I would absolutely welcome what information they bring back to this particular meeting. What I would then is I am unsure what your proposals are on this piece of paper. Is it as a notice of motion that we should have discussed at the beginning of the meeting, or is it just your views, or is it just a briefing paper? Because I was quite concerned on what I need to say and whether notice of motion rules apply in this particular instance. They don't, so it's just a discussion on the paper, and that's a briefing paper. Okay, that's fine. So let's talk about smaller unitaries. Some trusts can be set up, can't they, for adult social care, but that's only where there isn't an existing service. You have existing services coterminous with the Worcestershire boundary, so you cannot go for a two Worcestershire unitary authority on that argument with the trusts. The 500,000 is not an arbitrary figure. It is a repeating figure, and even in his political naivety, he has no option, but the minister, that being, has no option but to remain at 500,000, being the cost point when core services do actually become viable. I also need to point out that the county council is dissolving too. You know, we are not there in 2 years' time. Neither will you be there in 2 years' time. It is a case of absolutely maximising economies of scale over 600,000 as opposed to economies of scale over 150,000, which is what Wychavon is. I believe that the economies of scale will satisfy that argument. The disaggregation of a good service is not allowed, okay? Redditch, okay, will fall apart on this. They have no council tax base above the property level D, so therefore they cannot afford any additional services. And you cannot disadvantage at the advantage of one other area over another. So for my sake, and it was actually mentioned in the notices of motion earlier on, Councillor Rick Della referred to Worcestershire Corporate Parenting Board. Councillor Neil Franks referred to Worcestershire Domestic Abuse. Councillor Craig David support Worcestershire whatever his name, Community Trust, okay. Well, you shared his post, all right? So whatever is, well, Councillor Craig, support. Oh, right, sorry, beg your pardon. Okay. So really, you supported a Worcestershire Community Trust. I mean, where in all of this are North Worcestershire? Where in all of this is South Worcestershire? And I do believe we need absolutely strong leadership. We are the largest district council from a from many regards regarding financial capability, fiscal management, treasury management, and location and geographic area. We need to stand tall and take advantages of all the economies of scale for our residents, irrespective of whether you think there should be one unitary or not. We should absolutely stand tall and proud and go for unitary, and not accuse PwC of false information. Thank you. So I can't support the recommendations, whether it's a notice of motion or whether it's that.
Thank you. We go next to Councillor Dan Birch.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll try and keep it quick. So, unlike our budget, Worcester City Council's budget was not supported unanimously. And that's because, among other things, it was bloody dull. It was unimaginative. It lacked any sort of real-term investment. It was just boring. There was nothing in it in the same sort of lengths that we've had on ours. There was nowhere near that level of investment. Now, there's no way that we're going to be able to have a unitary that doesn't include Worcester City. But what we need to do is bolster ourselves, not break ourselves. We need to align ourselves with partners that we're going to be able to work with, that we're going to be able to drive investment with, that we're going to be able to make sure that we keep lowering council tax with. We don't want partners that are going to hold us back. And to benefit from those economies of scale, we need a one Worcestershire. Now, for those of us in the north of Wychavon, unlike the report, we do have closer ties with Birmingham. I can get to Birmingham quicker than I can get to Cheltenham. And for a number of councillors in this room, Councillor Della, Councillor Herdman, Councillor Dorks, Councillor Craig David, you share boundaries already with Redditch. You know, to draw us away from Redditch will make your lives a lot harder. Because, you know, if we move away from that partner, we don't have that unanimous working group that we would do under a one Worcestershire solution. We need these big partners. We need to be working as a county together to benefit from these economies of scale. And if we're wondering what the public thinks, well, I asked in a number of Droitwich groups, what do people think? Do people want one Worcestershire, a north and south? And the answer was clear, and nobody cared. Actually, what people said was, let's stay as we are, which I think is what a number of us have said in this room. But what nobody had was a preference for one or the other. What people said is, whatever's going to be cheapest, whatever's going to keep my council tax low, nobody really cared what it looked like. Whatever's going to work out the cheapest, and to benefit from economies of scale, you need a one Worcestershire. And in response to the timeline, none of us really know what the answer is here. None of us really have, you know, any sort of foresight in terms of what's going to happen or what's going to come from this, or what the right answer will be. And we won't know that for 20, 30 years until we see the results of it. But we have to go with our guts at this phase and look at what we want to push for. And once again, that should be a one Worcestershire solution. Let's work together. Let's make it happen. And on my thought process behind it follows a very simple acronym of KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Follow what we've got. We've got Worcestershire. Let's not break it up. Let's keep it easy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We go next on to Councillor Emma Kersey.
Chairman, thank you. Really, I was going to ask for some clarity in that obviously on the agenda it actually says to consider the report, but the leader has on about 5 or 6 occasions mentioned motion. And on that basis, I wonder why we've got the special meeting tabled next month, when I was assuming that was then when we were going to discuss this, and as one Wychavon actually vote and go forward with a motion. So really, it was more sort of for clarity, is it a motion or what is it really? We know that this is a dictate from the government. We know that as much as we can talk about the different options or whatever, we know it's a dictate from the government. It's not for a particular reason, obviously, that the shires haven't fundamentally moved to unitaries, because it doesn't necessarily suit the shires. We also know that this government has no care or any understanding whatsoever about the shires, and it feels like the government want to do anything that they can to destroy the shires and certainly destroy the countryside. And we also know that Wychavon has a long history and real true legacy of making every pound count for our residents. And I think really probably if we fast forward and look at this from a conversion, probably every £100,000 of money that Wychavon have used for the most fantastic schemes over the years, the conversion rate would probably equate to about a tenner in a unitary for all the pressures on money that the unitary will need. But that all being said, it is a dictate from the government to us. So what we need to do is we need to decide what is the best way forward for our residents. It's the best way forward for everything that needs to be provided for. And it's the best way forward fundamentally for Worcestershire. Now, yes, we've seen some terrible meetings being held recently. And my personal belief is that anybody that thinks that anything other than one Worcestershire is the right thing, then I don't believe that they are requesting that on the basis what's best for Worcestershire and its residents. I think that is purely based around political beliefs, because where people think they're going to gain the most strength in a divided Worcestershire. So I am absolutely clear. No, I don't agree with the dictate from the government, but we are where we are. But what we do need to do is, as Councillor Birch says, we need to join together. We need to make sure that we're an extremely strong Worcestershire to go forward in the best way to represent the Shire, but particularly for Worcestershire. And the only way to do that is with one Worcestershire. So if this is a motion, then I won't be supporting it, because it says a secondary case contender for 2 unitaries, north and south. And that is absolutely what we need to make sure does not happen. We must ensure that we fight and stay strong to make sure that the outcome of this is one Worcestershire.
So before we go on to another speaker, because we're running out of time on this meeting and we have several more items on this agenda, I'm going to read out the list of speakers that we've got so far, and then we won't be taking any more. So after Councillor Emma Kersey, we've got Councillor Jodie Arnold, Councillor Julie Tucker, Councillor Neil Franks, Councillor Liz Tucker, Councillor Mark Googe, Councillor Charles Tucker, Councillor Nick Robinson, Nick Wright. I thought
Chairman.
I'll read anything written in front of me. But before, is it short?
It's very short.
And Councillor Richard Morris after that, and Craig Reeves. That's pretty
Chairman,
much.
I don't think we should be stifling debate in this way. This is very important, and I don't think you. So we get home late. I mean, that doesn't matter to me. We should hear everybody.
That's pretty much everyone now. But before we carry on, I'm going to invite Councillor Day to clarify, to answer some of the questions and clarify.
No,
So
it's not a notice of motion. I don't understand where that's come from. There is a paper, there is an agenda item that has some recommendations on it. And one of those recommendations is to instruct the leader and the chief executive to pursue the council's preferences. Councillor Day has put forward a proposal on what the council's preferences may be, on the basis that the council believes that based on the benefits listed below, a one Worcester unitary authority should be selected as a current preferred primary case solution, with a 2 unitary north and south Worcestershire model as a secondary case contender. The point is that at this stage, what council is being asked to do is to instruct the leader and the chief executive to pursue an option when they go into the negotiations with the other council leaders and chief executives in the county. It's just a position that they can take to put forward for this council. Whatever comes back from those discussions will come back to the special meeting in March, where we will have more information, where you will actually be voting on what goes into the response.
So just for quick clarification, we're not voting here today, we're being told...
Councillor Wilkins, please wait to be invited to speak. So for clarity, that is that both options are still on the table, but that we can select a preference. I'm going to invite Vic to speak.
I mean, Misha's already partly covered that. There was a question in there about why we're having a special meeting in March. The answer is we have to submit an interim plan to government as a county. So we've been invited in the 5th of February letter from the Minister to work with our other councils in Worcestershire to produce an interim plan, which we now know to be a position statement to go into the government. Okay. What Chris and I need is to know before we go into those discussions and finalise that interim plan is that our preferences are incorporated in that plan. We're not going to get unanimity of views across the county. What we want to make sure is we've reflected this council's views in that interim plan that goes into the government. So we need this debate today so we can understand what the council's views are. We're coming back in March, a few days before the deadline for the submission of that interim plan.
So for clarity, this motion, both options would be explored or the recommendations here, both options would be explored. It's whether there's a preference and whether there are other options. I'm going to bring it back to Councillor Day, if he so chooses, or I can send it back out to the room.
Yeah, so if I can try and take a bit of the angst possibly out of the situation. The final solution, if you like, or the proposal will not be going in until November. And by that time, we will all have possibly had plenty of time and maybe got even a little bit bored about looking at all of the data and so on that's involved. All we're doing tonight is just flushing out whether or not there are any other viable proposals other than a whole and a north-south. And for those of you who are worried about that, this is happening in all of the 7 authorities, basically. And in most cases, they are saying, yeah, that's right, it's either the whole thing or it's north and south. We do need to look at both. The government is actually saying, we would like you to have, if you like, a champion and challenger, because they see that as being a better test, if you like, of the proposal that you're putting forward. So we're not deciding tonight what it is that we're going to go for necessarily. I have said that I would like to have a preferred motion because if I don't say that, I can assure you that somebody else will tell me what I have said, which is what happened in January. I said nothing, and they said I was supporting a southerly combination. So I have to say something. And my preference is, as I've tried to make clear, because I think there is a pretty strong de facto case for it, that of a one Worcestershire. So I hope that makes it clear. You're not going to lose anything. The next meeting will be looking at the proposal in more detail. We will be looking at we are asking our Section 151 officers to look at the PwC report simply so that they can check the assumptions that are in there. I think that's perfectly reasonable. I don't think anybody's casting aspersions about a fine accountancy firm. I say that as having worked for them. So I don't think it should be a problem. Yeah. So, but I do think it's worth checking assumptions, and frankly, it's perfectly possible for accountants to come up with different conclusions from the same data, just as anybody else can. So I think most of us would be aware of that. It's right, therefore, that we get everybody to check through the data, and hopefully we'll get to a point where we've got an established block of data that we then work from in terms of coming to conclusions. If there are any questions on that, happy to try and clarify them, but that's it. Tonight, all we're doing is just checking out whether there are any other solutions out there that you would like Vic and I to talk to the other leaders about.
So, on the list, we now have Councillor Jodie Arnold.
Hello, thank you, Chris. Given what you've just said, I'd like to say I'm incredibly open-minded. I am not set on one way or another. I can appreciate why you've given us those 2 options because they are the most obvious. And like you said, from a monetary point of view, the bigger you can make it, the more the economy of scale, etc. I do have some concerns over how well our residents will be represented. Will they be better represented if it's split so that they have more of an identity? I'd like more information, basically, before we get... I appreciate we've got another meeting, but I require more facts, more figures, rather than feeling and thought. Which is what we seem to have been given at the minute. So I'm hoping that we do get this further information, facts, figures, so we can make an informed decision. In regards to other ideas, have we heard what other councils are doing? Is that something you can bring to us? If other councils have had further thoughts and ideas for us to discuss in that meeting, that would be interesting as well to hear about.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, briefly, the leaders have only come up with those 2 suggestions, and there's no evidence, as far as I'm aware, of any council putting forward anything different, if that makes it easier.
So next we have Councillor Julie Tucker.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I probably don't have an awful lot to say now you've clarified it, Chris, other than the fact that you worried me to death when I saw it initially, because I thought, why are we talking about this now when we've got a meeting coming up? If you'd have just said, these are the two ideas, are you happy with that? That would have been fine. And if we do have, as Dan has already said, we need more information as well, much more information before we can even start really to be looking at this properly.
Thank you. Councillor Mark Goode.
Thank you, Chair.
Apologies, sorry, I'd looked
I was
at...
going to say, it's probably not me, is it? Somebody else.
Councillor Neil Franks. I'd looked at the surname Tucker following this one. And
Thank you. I think, yeah, I mean, I've written a lot of notes, so I'm just going to get them out there anyway before things were clarified a bit. I think I sort of partly agreed with Dan Birch, who said no one knows. So, you know, my thoughts is, we do need a lot more information. The paper that Vic put out said that we can take forward both options for the March deadline. So there is no sort of pressure to sort of make a decision or a preference now. Obviously, the May elections are around the corner, and we will have a new county council with lots of new faces, and they will be a big part of sort of leading us into the unitary. So whilst I acknowledge that the leadership did make a decision early doors, that might sort of change come sort of May time. The council, they made some very good points about a one Worcestershire, and you know, I thought they were very good, but I also want to hear someone making the same sort of good points around the north-south divide, because I've not made a decision. I am genuinely, it's whatever is best for my sort of residents. That's what I want, and I want to hear the good and bad of both options, so I can make an informed choice. I think also, just to bring in the mix that we haven't really touched on, is the changes to town and parish councils is probably, especially for town councils, is probably going to be quite substantial. And, you know, there's a lot of discussion ahead on that front at the town council and parish council level. And I want to know, is the two main options going to affect them too? And yeah, so I kind of have to disagree with this one, Councillor Day, because I think it's only fair and right that councillors do get sort of information, and both of them are sort of equally put forward and equally fought for to give better facts and information so we can make decisions for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Councillor Liz Tucker.
Thank you. You were saying that you're asking whether there are additional solutions to the two that are here, and that's a perfectly fair question. But the resolution that you put forward for us to discuss and decide on today is actually putting the preference on the whole Worcestershire, and as a secondary, adding the option of two-way. Now, you probably know my own views, but that's not the point. The point is that I think it is unacceptable to expect councillors to make a decision before the research begins and on the basis of a paper that they may or may not have noticed came in at 2:15 today. So that's why I'm strongly against this. But the agenda paper that was circulated originally told us that it was perfectly okay for both options to be sent forward without expressing preference. And I don't see why we can't just stick to what was originally in the Chief Executive's paper. The Wychavon has been around for just over 50 years. I didn't get involved until 91. And I have to say that it has grown and evolved and changed substantially over those years. it used to be Wychavon, where the hell is all of that? All three towns hated each other. You know, there was no unity there, and there wasn't much good practice either. And over the years, I agree that some very good work has been done in putting things together. And there is a legacy there that we believe we are offering our residents, which is better than we see other areas offering their residents. There is a legacy that we, I'm sure, could find consensus on ourselves, that we would want to find ways of seeing how that can be continued in the future to the best ability. And also the clever finances of this council. Should they've been extracted from Wychavon residents, and should they somehow be put into activities and long-lasting legacy activities that belong to our area, rather than just put it into the bottomless pit that we know exists in the county council area. And I speak as somebody who loved the county council. So I think we could not have any problems at all today if we stuck to the Chief Executive's paper rather than asked us to vote formally on a preference. I do believe and hope that we can work together for cross-party consensus on the best way forward and the best things that we need to preserve in the future. And to be honest, a lot of all the budget stuff and things like that at the moment are less important to me than making the best we can out of the next couple of years for something long-lasting. Wychavon will be forgotten, but it has done good work.
Thank you. Now, two of the three Tuckers on our list through. We now go to Mark Googe, and then it will be Charles Tucker after that.
Thank you, Chair. We do seem to have a bit of a strange outbreak of cross-party unity in a lot of the things we've discussed tonight already. I do have to say that I have considerable sympathy with Councillor Boatwright-Green's position on this. I'm going to come to a somewhat different conclusion because I do think we need to give Chris and Vic the backing to go into the discussions with their fellow leaders and chief executives, knowing that they have got our opinion. And my opinion is simply the same as we've got on the paper, that my preference would be for a one Worcestershire solution, but I don't believe we can at this stage rule out a north-south solution. The simple fact is that ultimately it will not be us that decide, it will be the government that decides. If we rule out a solution now and have it imposed on us, that outcome will be worse than if we are willing to consider that, even if it is not our preference. The only things I would ask for in the meantime, firstly, I would like us to deliberately make an effort to engage with our public. I know people have said, you've asked residents and residents don't care, but maybe that's because they don't realise the implications that this is going to have. And I think we should be making an effort to communicate this out to our residents and get their opinions so that we can take those opinions into the discussions when we have them later. And the other thing is we've talked about this report that has been commissioned from, that the county has commissioned from PwC giving the data. We've had preliminary information from it, but I want to see the full paper. That, I think we need to make that a non-negotiable. We want that full paper on our desks before we have to make a binding decision. And if we do not, I'm going to abstain on that.
Thank you. Charles Tucker.
Thank you. Well, I have to say that I am, in theory, persuaded by the one Worcestershire County argument, one Worcestershire Council argument. However, I also know that the current County Council is a basket case, and the current administration in the County Council has made a pig's ear of it. And if that is to be continued into a new council, I think we will have the worst of all worlds. Now, it's already been said, Neil Franks mentioned that things may change quite a bit when the elections come in May, and for goodness sake, I certainly hope they will. But maybe the idea of one Worcestershire Council that covers the whole of the services that the County Council provides at the moment across that whole area is a broken flush. Maybe it is not possible to do the things that the county does and a unitary would do across the whole county and maintain the sort of accessible, sensitive council that we have at the moment within Wychavon, which is responsive to members of the public, which provides a good level of representation. I think the County Council fails abysmally on that, and we see the consequences of that. And as I say, financially, they've made a complete mess of it. So it's about time that we need something totally different. So although I'm persuaded in theory by the one Worcestershire Council, the way that it is working at the moment makes me feel it's the last thing I want.
Before you come in, Councillor Stokes, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah,
you've spoken on this
you.
debate already. Was it a point of order?
It's not a debate and it's not a notice of motion, so I can come back as many times as I wish. Thank you. And this is coming from a member of the basket case that we've just identified. Okay, so let's look at this. So you've called Worcestershire County Council a basket case. That is absolutely an insult to the good work that it does to your residents. It helps your residents, home to school transport, adult social care, children's services, all Ofsted rated good. It is an exceptional service and all for the lowest council tax in the particular country, or third lowest in the country. It is applied for exceptional finance support, which I think is an absolute brilliant decision. Fiscally, we could possibly require an additional £33.6 million in the year. But if we budget better and correctly, we may not actually need it. So we have potentially ordered a credit card to absolutely solve any overspend on any demand-led service. The demand-led services are the only ones that we are overspending on. There is no overspend on any of the other areas. And I would like to, somebody is actually raving incredibly excited over there. However, what I would point out is £33.6 million is at less than 1% of the overall budget of a £500 million budget. And I look at other basket case councils, such as Birmingham, which has 490 million, and then other ones have 127. And then we have others that are 57, 88, 72.
I'm going to bring this back to order.
No, I don't think
you
so.
have, Councillor Stokes, I think you have a valid point that the County Council does do some excellent work.
And we're not basket cases.
I think that's a very fair comment.
I would like to point out that the devolution paper, the letter on the 2nd of February, if it's not a notice of motion, I will continue. Nevertheless, it is not at the council.
I think if you want to stay in this room, you will respect, Councillor Stokes, if you want to stay in the room, I think you will respect when I try and bring this back to the item of agenda in front of us. I think you have a very valid point that the County Council does some excellent work, and whether you want to take this up with Councillor Tucker outside of this meeting, I think that would be fair. I think he was quite out of order attacking the County Council on this item.
Exactly, and you need a right to reply.
Perhaps, but I'm going to bring this back to the item in front of us.
Let me read it.
Vic Allison has asked to clarify a point before that came up.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can just clarify the process here, which may or may not help. We've been set a very ambitious deadline of the 21st of March to submit an interim plan as Worcestershire councils, as leaders of Worcestershire councils. We now know that that's is a progress update and can contain more than one proposal if more than one proposal has been looked at in the county. That interim plan won't be binding, it's purely an update. We will have until November to finalise proposals for the county. at which point we need to take a decision as a council which proposal we're going to back. And the government would like to see single proposals from county areas, but understands there may well be competing proposals. In the period between the interim plan being submitted and the November 28th deadline for final proposals, we will have, and you will expect to receive, all the information that's been talked about today in terms of consultation outcomes, in terms of numbers and finances and costs and savings and all of that stuff. I want to just make it quite clear, you're not going to get all that information at the special council meeting in March. What you're going to get is a draft interim plan that all the leaders in the county have put together, which the council will be asked to sign off. Okay? And that is likely to include both options. The purpose of today's meeting is to understand, A, to make sure you understand that, and B, to hear any other views that are emerging that Chris and I need to take away and try and incorporate in those discussions. So hopefully that explains the process. So the task at the moment is to understand and agree an interim plan that will be submitted by the 21st of March. It won't be binding. There will be plenty of time for further debate and more information in the period to November, where you will be asked to submit full proposals, either along with other councils in Worcestershire, some other councils in Worcestershire, or indeed on our own, because, as I said earlier, the government does understand there may well be competing proposals from an area. We hope there will be a single proposal, but there's obviously a possibility that that won't be the case. Hopefully that's explained the process, Chairman.
Thank you. So now we go to Councillor Nick Wright.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm not going to be flippant, but we had a full day yesterday on planning, and we've got an even fuller day tomorrow, so time is going on. Just to say, and this is completely untechnical, and I agree with all the comments, especially yours, Councillor Boatwright Green, that Worcestershire has character, and this is completely untechnical, and it's got an identity. And I think, for my purposes, as has Gloucestershire, Warwickshire and all the other counties, and for my purposes, it would be a shame to cut it in two. That's all I'm saying, really.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Morris.
Thank you, Chairman, and I appreciate the clarification that Vic's given to Council. I'm going to start off. You all know my position. I am Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care at the County Council, and I'm privileged to have that role. And I do believe I carry it out with heart and honesty. As I do, I believe my colleagues do as well. So I won't take any flack against County. But tonight isn't about County. It's about our future and what we want to achieve for our future. I am a Wychavon person, and I wear Wychavon and this council in my heart, and have done for a long time. And it is sad that this council will be going, but it is where we are at, and we have to look at where we are and the facts that face us. I will speak strongly for One Worcestershire, and I will explain why. And to a degree, it is in Jim McMahon's letter. And Jim McMahon clearly states, it is not in council taxpayers' interest to devote public funds or your valuable time and effort into the development of multiple proposals which unnecessarily fragment services, compete against one another, require lengthy implementation periods, or which do not sufficiently address the local interests and identities. He is clearly stating that we should be looking at One Worcestershire, I do believe, by what he's saying there. It is the clearest clarification in order to carry on with the services that we have. But where I want to come from is where Wychavon plays within that situation. And I want us to be open, honest and strong, because we should be leading this change. We are the best council within Worcestershire, and we should be at the forefront, very clear with what we want to achieve, and try and change the culture of the One Worcestershire approach. And we can only do that by being strong together and leading from the front and making sure that One Worcestershire has our identity and the best interests of our people at heart. So I would say we don't want to look at two areas, north-south, go for One Worcestershire and lead it from Wychavon.
Thank you. We next go to Councillor Craig Reeves.
if we could have the PwC figures on Monday, a meeting to discuss options on Tuesday, then we could discuss the South Worcestershire Authority on Wednesday, a whole Worcestershire Authority on Thursday, and then we all know what happens on a Friday, right? Thank you. I'll take that. In all seriousness, though, Councillor Day, absolutely appreciate your position here. This is a game-changing time for our authorities. I deleted my comment about having to work miracles communicating with Worcestershire based on Councillor Stokes' comments, but I'd like to say well done for that. To reiterate Councillor Kersey, we have future meetings arranged to discuss this in more detail. Councillor Boatwright-Green, we need to see those PwC figures. So for me, and those that I speak to in my ward, because they're quite vocal, they worry about their identity, the identity of where they live. They worry about all our eggs being in one basket. You know, we've had county bailouts. I know that there's slightly more to that, reported last week by government. And they worry that their voices within a larger council may be lost. But everyone is keen to find out more. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dan Boatwright-Green.
The reason I didn't mention county is we have very strong feelings about it. So this is very strong feelings. But one of the things I think we need to remember is there are 7 councils involved in this. And one of the big issues is that at the moment, one council has primarily been making the decisions for us county. I understand what's in that letter, but also at the same time, there are options. And I'm sorry, it really comes back to, show me the figures and then we can talk. At the moment, we've still got thoughts and feelings, interpretations of ministers. I wouldn't interpret a minister for love nor money. You have no idea what they're doing, especially with the current government. So at the moment, can we just bring it back to where we are and then we can make decisions from there. But I do feel like the 19th of March at the moment, half of what is actually going to be said at that point has just been said tonight. So I am beginning to wonder whether we can make that one maybe 30 minutes.
I do hope so. So, now, we take it back to Councillor Chris Day to round off before we take it back to Councillor Aaron Powell for the last word. If you'd rather go first, that works for me as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to perhaps focus initially on what I think we can all agree on. And I think there's 2 things we can certainly agree on. The first is that this whole thing is being rushed by the government. I don't think we're being given the time to do this properly, and I think that's very regrettable. This is a significant change to the structure of local government across the whole of the country, and I feel that it is being rushed, and I don't appreciate the timescales that the government is giving to this. I think it's wholly inappropriate for a change of this nature. There may be good intentions behind it. Certainly there is some confusion at times around who does what in terms of local government, and there may be benefits to moving to more unitary authorities. But to do it at this pace, I think, is unacceptable. Councillor Stokes said that the Minister's new letter plays politics with the residents of Worcestershire and that he's deliberately sent the letter in order to do so. I wish I could agree with her, but I'm afraid I think he probably doesn't care. In fact, I'd go further and say I'm not even sure he knows where Worcestershire is, and perhaps he'd be the first candidate for one of Councillor Boatwright-Green's geography lessons to tell him where Worcestershire is and to introduce him to all of the fine things that we know of in Wychavon and in Worcestershire. And speaking of those fine things, I think the other thing that I hope we can all agree on is that over the course of the next few years, it is our responsibility as the councillors for this district to continue to deliver excellent services for as long as we continue to exist as a district and to leave a legacy. And I think Councillor Mrs Tucker made that point. It is our responsibility now to think about what our legacy will be and to ensure that whatever follows, we leave this district in the best possible place it can be. Having looked at the options, it does seem to me that the only option that meets the criteria that are set out in the letter is a single Worcestershire unitary authority. And therefore, that probably has to be our primary case option because it is the only one that meets the criteria. Yes, there has been a suggestion that there might be some exceptions. That suggestion so far has only come from a single member of parliament in a private meeting. There has been no indication that I've seen from government of any flexibility around those numbers. And therefore, I think we have to take the letter at face value. And our primary response has to be to use the criteria that are set and to give a proposal that meets those criteria. I also believe that given the current model of social care, I think it is unlikely that that social care at the scale that it is currently required across the county can be delivered sustainably by smaller authorities. There are different delivery models that we can look at. Joint services has been mentioned. I think that's all fine. But when you look at the scale of the financial challenge that social care and special educational needs represents versus the overall pot of money that is available, I fear that moving to anything smaller than a council of significant scale will simply advance the inevitable walk towards council bankruptcies. And that's something that I'm sure we all wish to avoid. So for that reason, I do think, again, it is likely that a single option is probably preferable. And there's a very real risk that in smaller councils, every other item of spending gets squeezed out, and the only thing that takes the money is social care and special educational needs. Already 72% of the county's money is spent on those two items. If we have smaller councils, I fear it could be closer to 90% plus, and that simply means that other services will not get delivered. But I do think these are arguments that are finely balanced, and I do think it is important that we have the time to have the debate and to come up with balanced options. I think what we have before us today is a balanced proposal. It seeks a steer and not a decision. It doesn't take one option off the table entirely, but it does give our officers some direction in terms of what they should be thinking about as they look to come back with an interim plan in March. And bear in mind that that special council meeting is 4 days before we have to submit that plan to the government. There's a very real risk, if we hadn't had the debate here today, that if somebody had some other options on the table, our officers would go away, come up with a plan, and then it gets rejected at council on the 17th of March, and we have nothing to submit to the government on the 21st. And that, I think, would be a very poor place for us to be. So I think it's right that we explore the data. I think it's right that we look at the PwC report. I think it's right that we validate all that data and make sure that it is correct and represents our view of the world. But I think this evening we've had a good debate. Mostly. I think we have that steer from the council that there are differing views, but so far there are no alternative proposals, and I think that gives our officers the steer they need in thinking about that interim plan to come back with on the 21st of March.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Thank you. I think Aaron has summarised the position very well, and as far as I'm concerned, I think we do have a reasonable steer based on the conversations that we've had. You know, I've heard several voices saying that they are in favour of a one Worcestershire model. I haven't, I have to say, heard of any voices saying they're absolutely adamant that they want a north-south model yet. I've heard several people saying they reserve the right to think about it and they need more information and they want to look at it, and that's absolutely fine. So, you know, what I really would request is that if anybody has some other fantastic model, as I said at the beginning, please do let us know, because I'm sure we'd all be fascinated to know what it looked like and how it would cure all the ails that we've discussed. But my conclusion thus far is there isn't one. And so we will go forward to the discussions with the other leaders based on the information that we've got, and we take strong, firmly the views that you've expressed about wanting the data, the sharing of the data in particular from the PwC report, if that turns out to be the only sort of firm source of data that we're given as we go forward through this process. One last thought, and it is just reflected by what others said. We should, of course, be proud of the culture that we've got in Wychavon. I think it is one of the best cultures of all within Worcestershire in terms of our creativity and the outcomes that we've had. And we absolutely should be leading in terms of what will come from the unitary. And that is certainly, I think, that something that we can all unite around. We've got a lot of talent in this room. We've got a lot of talent amongst our officers. And so we should be doing something to do that. It will be helpful, therefore, when it comes to our meeting in March, if we are more aligned around what it is that we're absolutely pursuing. At some point, we're going to have to call it, and it will be easier, the earlier that we do that. Not essential for March, but it will be easier if we were clear. And I would just ask everybody, if you've got questions, ideas, comments, please do send them to myself or Vic. In particular, if you've got strong supportive arguments for the North-South and you've just been too afraid to voice them, send those to me too, because I had to make them up, and I've not actually seen anything from anybody yet, despite having lots of discussions with the other leaders. I've not really had very concrete arguments from it. It does tend to come down to that emotional voice of it's something smaller, it's something that's closer to home, it's something that's familiar. So with that, I thank you all very much. I don't think we'll need to say any more. Thank you.
So we're going to go to the vote, and Councillor Day, I'm just going to clarify from the agenda item.
I was just going to recommend it. Okay. I'm not sure that if we have a vote, I'll get meaningful information from it. That's what I'm hearing. I don't think I will, because I think I've got a lot of faces who are saying they don't have the information available. And actually, if you rerun what happened in Malvern Hills, it was a very similar sort of experience. They did take 2 votes. They had an alternative vote. And I think where they ended up with, and this is what concerns me, is that they ended up proclaiming that they're actually in favour of a north-south split, when in fact there was quite a lot of debate that said the very opposite. So I don't really particularly want to rerun that experience here. I don't think there will be any benefit. But what I think would be beneficial for me is if you're very clear in your own mind, one way or the other, please email. Because what would be useful for me is to have a bit of a poll on where people are with it and why, in particular the why.
So 2.1, the recommendation there, the council view is what's been discussed today, but we still need to have a vote on 2.2, that the council instructs the leader and the chief executive to follow the points at 2.21 and 2.22, and that is for the leader to go forward with what Councillor Day has just explained.
Could it add a recommendation that the council preference is a 1 Worcestershire?
So I think that was the original preference, but I think what the leader has just said is to drop that preference, if I'm correct, and that it's to go forward just to pursue both preferences. Is that right, Chris?
I think my concern is that if we vote on the motion as it stands, based on the feedback that I've had, that we won't necessarily get a clear opinion of where people stand. Some people are saying that they'll vote against this because, for different reasons. I've heard they're concerned about not having the data from PwC. They're concerned about not having enough data to look at, etc. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. If you feel that it's too early to sort of express a preference, I think the problem with us having a vote now is that will turn out to be seen as a vote against a 1 unitary, and you might actually be in favour of it, but you just don't feel you've got enough information currently. We do have to have a vote on 2.2, in other words, whether or not that we're recommending an interim plan.
If I clarify, for 2.1, to consider the contents of the report and to agree a council view regarding the local government reorganisation and devolution. The position on that is, as the leader has just described, that the current view is that there are the 2 main options to take forward for discussion. Then 2.2, to instruct the leader and the chief executive to pursue that preference of either or, both those options in discussions with other Worcestershire councils and more widely as necessary. And 2.22, bring back to the council a recommended interim plan for submission to the government.
Councillor Boatwright-Green.
So we'd be voting to basically say, please go forth and discuss these 2, but we don't have a preference.
Councillor Emma Kersey.
Just to clarify, what Misha just read out states that the council has already actually come to a preference. That's the issue.
No, so that's what's just been changed, is that what will be taken forward is just that the council explore the 2 options and come back with an interim report. So
if I get Councillor Day, are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think I'm happy with the following. So what we've said is it's too early to have an express preference. We don't have the data. Okay. That we are happy that we will explore 2 options and that there is no other alternative option on the table, and that we are happy that there will be an interim plan. Fine.
And Councillor Powell, are you happy that that is what you're seconding?
Yes, I'm happy.
Okay, I'm going to take the vote. All those in favour of that proposal, please indicate now. All those against? All those abstaining? Councillor Robinson, I counted you as 4 and...
Apologies, Misha. I hoped I'd put my hand down before you counted.
Okay, so that vote is carried. 34, 2 against and 4 abstentions.
Thank you. Okay, so next one that we'll hopefully go through much quicker. Item 14, the adoption of the Harvington Neighbourhood Plan Review. I believe this is proposed by Councillor Paul Middleborough.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a shame if it does rush forward in a way, because this is a... Sorry, it's a shame if it does rush forward because of timing, but this actually is an important document that's come forward, and I think it's a reminder to all of us and our parishes of the importance of neighbourhood plans. This is actually the first review that we've had of a neighbourhood plan, and because it was reviewed, it's been looked at by the independent assessor, and it doesn't require a vote, but it does bring it up to date, and it then becomes part of the statutory arrangements within the Wychavon plan. If you give it to your parishes who don't have neighbourhood plans and let them actually read through what the good people have done in Harvington. I don't want to say any more because I think perhaps a local councillor is a little closer to it than I am, but well done to them to getting it through now.
Just to clarify, when you say it doesn't require a vote, do you mean it doesn't require a vote in the area, but it does require a vote here?
It does require a vote, my understanding is, this evening, but it doesn't require a referendum. As
Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. I believe we have a seconder, Councillor Craig Reeves.
Thank you. Yes, as member of Harvington, I second the adoption of this neighbourhood plan and also take this opportunity on behalf of Harvington Parish to thank the volunteers and councillors who have worked tirelessly to deliver this plan. The steering group, led by Councillor Gillian Smith of the parish, and of course Wychavon, who've helped support the plan. In particular, Wychavon's Francis Fleming, whose input has been noted by the parish council, so thank you. Harvington hold the neighbourhood plan in very high regard. It ensures that the village retains its character and social cohesion. It provides control over the level of growth with aim to protect infrastructure and the open countryside. Speaking with many, in particular at a recent surgery, there is a level of concern about the increase in housing demand, and of course the effects that this may have upon the village. If I may at this point highlight the significance of Harvington's, well, any neighbourhood plan and the protection and confidence it provides the parish council and its residents. It enables a democratic say by those who live within the villages and how they wish to shape their surroundings for future generations. So I thank you all for supporting this neighbourhood plan. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Emma Kersey.
Chairman, thank you. Before I speak on this, could I just ask a question, please, to Councillor Middleborough? As I read through the review and everything from the inspector, it wasn't clear to me. I can see that the review contains a housing allocation, but to know if that housing allocation meets the full housing requirement for Harvington.
It having gone before the local inspector and review, it's gone before our head of planning, and therefore I am assured that it does, and that it wouldn't have come to us if it wasn't comprehensive and in line with our other policies.
Chairman, thank you. Sorry, that wasn't actually particularly my question, Councillor Middleborough, because neighbourhood plans can be adopted and reviewed without having housing allocations that meet the full housing requirement. So it was just to know whether the housing allocation that's in the neighbourhood plan does meet the full housing requirement for Harvington, because it does have quite a big implication.
Come back to you with the detail.
I'll invite Andy to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. The situation is that the allocation in the
neighbourhood plan has actually been recommended to be taken out by the examiner because it's been completed and built out. So there is no allocation now in the neighbourhood plan.
Thank you. Are you satisfied?
So I mean, just to clarify, the reasoning for that is that you can't counter an allocation that's been completed and built out in your supply.
Thank you. Are you satisfied, Councillor Kersey?
Well, I was possibly, that slightly takes away from what I was actually going to say, congratulating Harvington. But nevertheless, as you know, I'm a massive fan of neighbourhood plans. And so congratulations and well done to Harvington for reviewing their neighbourhood plan. And also to thank Bradley Thomas MP as the previous ward member for Harvington, as his legacy continues on in Wychavon, who I'm sure Councillor Reeves would like to join me in thanking him for making his life substantially easier, having a neighbourhood plan in place. What I was really going to go on to say is that those of us on the planning committee have, as the chairman of the planning committee has said, an extremely full agenda tomorrow, and it is our greatest wish, I think that I speak on behalf of every member of the planning committee, that every parish in Wychavon has a neighbourhood plan in place, because certainly if the applications wouldn't be on the agenda tomorrow if they had neighbourhood plans in place. So thank you to everybody that has a neighbourhood plan and that reviews it, and I can't say enough to encourage people to come forward with neighbourhood plans and to preferably have the housing allocations within them. Thank you.
Wonderful. If there are no other comments or questions on this, I shall put it to the vote. All those in favour? Oh, apologies. Councillor Andy Dyke.
It's an easy question, I hope. How much did this cost to the Harvington resident?
We'll come back with the figure for that.
Are you happy to go to the vote before that figure? Wonderful. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. This brings us next to reports of the chairman. We start with executive board. Oh, policy statement. Apologies. We'll call that low blood sugar as we go past my dinner time. Brings us to item 15, 2025-2026, pay policy statements. Thank you. To consider the enclosed report, we go to Councillor Aaron Powell.
Thank you, Chair. When I introduced the budget report earlier, I referred to substantial items later on in the agenda that we needed to spend a considerable time discussing, and of course this was the report I was referring to. No, in all seriousness, colleagues, this is our annual pay policy statement. It sets out the pay policy that we use to pay our staff. It sets out the pay bands for all of our staff and provision for senior management team pay. It is an annual requirement and I am happy to commend it to Council.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Dane.
Happy to second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions from around the room? I see no hands. Could we have all those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Now we go to reports of the chairman. Item 16, the Executive Board. Councillor Day.
Thank you, Chairman. There have been two meetings of the Executive Board since the last meeting of the Council on the 11th of December 2024. The first of those meetings took place on the 8th of January 2025, and at that meeting we recommended approval of the publication of the South Worcestershire Local Development Scheme 2024 to 2026 to come into effect from February 2025, and agreed the Council tax base for 2025-26. The first of these was just approved by the Council. And at the meeting of the Exec Board on the 12th of February, we made recommendations to this Council on the We Are Wychavon plan, the budget and the money plan, the capital strategy and the treasury management strategy, along with an additional capital budget for our parks and open spaces. All of these recommendations have been accepted by the Council this evening. At this meeting of the Executive Board, we also considered the We Are Wychavon Q3 performance report, an update in relation to our buildings enhancement budget, and an allocation from the Section 106 contributions reserved to enable Wychavon Leisure to install 12 sets of smart bars and weights at Pershore Leisure Centre. Thank you.
Grand, thank you. And if there are no questions or points of clarity from the floor, we go next on to item 17, overview and scrutiny. Councillor B. Herdman, sorry.
Yeah, I'm only Beverley at the weekends. Since the last council meeting, the ONS committee has met twice, on the 15th of January and the 19th of February. The first meeting was attended by 4 representatives from Platform Housing, and we saw a presentation that outlined their 5-year corporate strategy and their strategic goals for 23 to 26. Platform made councillors aware of their current statistics and presented performance-related data. There was lots of information covered by the representatives, and a couple of standout initiatives were their Wellbeing Fund, which supplies support for energy costs, food, white goods and furniture for their customers, and their neighbourhood walkabouts, with Platform confirming it was committed to engage with councillors and residents where there were areas of concern. They also shared information on their Customer First programme, which provides proactive tenancy health checks on their customers to ensure they receive yearly contact. Councillor Julie Tucker, chair of the Budget Scrutiny Group, introduced the final report and outlined the recommendations before the committee for approval. At the meeting on the 19th of February, the committee saw a presentation by representatives from Severn Trent. They spoke about climate change, their environmental investments and pledges to improve the health of the rivers and water quality in the district and beyond. Severn Trent confirmed that from April it would be committed to its new asset management plan, with customer service being one of its new performance incentives. The councillors were informed of a new dedicated email address through which they could raise their concerns. Severn Trent outlined a number of initiatives it was delivering to reduce storm overflow spill, which include installing storm overflow tanks, reed beds, and looking to increase flow to sewage treatment works, and also reinstating flap valves, which I was interested to hear. Flap valves used to be an initiative, and then they all got blocked up, so now they're going to try and reinstate them and stop them from getting blocked up. One thing that stands out for me as an action the council can take, along with Severn Trent, is that education is key to winning this battle. Rainwater is a huge issue. Sewage treatment plants have no need to treat rainwater. However, if it's not captured, it must go through the treatment plant and put more strain on valuable resource. Severn Trent are doing a trial on smart water butts, believe it or not, in Derbyshire, and offer discounted water butts across the country. There were concerns raised by members of the committee that the quality of roadworks was not up to scratch, and Severn Trent now have a dedicated roadworks compliance team who are scrutinising contractors and their quality of work, of which I'm sure anybody that travels along the A44 will be pleased about. The committee also heard a planning development management update from Kieran Power, where he gave a service review, explained the new team structure, gave an update on performance, the challenges the team are facing, and the improvements being made. The We Are Wychavon performance report was discussed, and I'll second Councillor Crump in saying a big thank you to the officers responsible for producing the report in a much more legible format. The next overview and scrutiny committee meeting is on the 9th of April, where we'll have the pleasure of rooftop housing. And as ever, anybody's welcome to join.
Thank you. And if there are no questions or points of clarity from the floor, we go next on to item 18, Planning Committee. Councillor Nick Wright.
Thank you, Chair. We've only had one meeting since the last council, which only looked at one application. We are making up for it this week in a big way. We had an all-day yesterday looking at site visits to 10. Well, we actually saw, I think, 7 yesterday, including lunch. Thank you, Wychavon, for providing that. And tomorrow we have 10 applications coming through, 6 of which are major applications involving 357 houses, which gives you an idea of the government pressure and actually pressure from everybody on increasing housing supplies. Our 5-year housing supply is now 1.1 years, which is why it's so difficult, and we are obviously looking forward to the SWDP review being started in March, hearings, and completed this year. So thank you to the members of the committee and to the officers who have little room for manoeuvre at the moment. until this new plan is adopted. But thank you for all the efforts you make.
Thank you. And if there are no questions or points of clarity from the floor, we shall go to item 19, the Licensing Committee. Councillor Mark Hughes.
Thank you, Chairman. Full Licensing Committee hasn't met since the last council, so that doesn't take much time to report. But if anybody wants to warm up for the special council meeting on the 19th of March, you could come along to licensing in the afternoon, where we will be, among other things, hoping to receive the first draft of our busking policy. So that's something to look forward to. In the meantime, we've had 3 licensing subcommittees which have dealt with a total of 5 vehicles.
Thank you. Again, seeing nothing from the floor. So we go on to item 20, Member Conduct Committee. Councillor Paul Middleborough.
Thank you, Chairman. The Member Conduct Committee met on the 10th of February. The committee considered the government's proposals on the current standards regime and whether it should send a committee response. It was decided that it should, and this has been submitted. The committee received a verbal update from the monitoring officer on current complaints. The next meeting is due to take place on the 7th of April.
Councillor Emma Stokes.
All right, thank you. Could you tell me, are there any complaints being upheld or being pursued for at independent level? Thank you.
I think it's inappropriate for me to actually speak about the current complaints, and that will come through the normal processes of the committee.
Thank you. This takes us next on to item 21, the Audit Committee. Councillor Nick Dawkes.
Thank you, Chair. The Audit Committee met on Friday the 14th of February, with the primary item on the agenda being the approval of the statement accounts for 2023-24. The committee was advised that due to the backlog of disclaimed audits issued by the previous external auditors, excuse me, the new auditors, AZETS, would also have to issue a disclaimed opinion for the 2023-24 statement of accounts. It should be noted that the Council's finance team has been exemplary in ensuring that all of its work, including the statement of accounts, has been delivered on time, and that 80% of the councils nationwide are in a similar position, which explains the government's involvement in allowing accounts to be disclaimed. AZETS also presented their audit completion report and their annual report for 2023-24. They assured the committee that looking forward, they had prioritised their work in order to develop a recovery plan with a view to moving forward from disclaimed opinions. The committee also considered the Council's 2025-26 budget and its money plan to 2029-30, its capital strategy for 2025-26 and the Treasury Management Strategy for 2025-26. With the Chair praising the Council's decisions to diversify some of its cash investments into property assets, which have provided very favourable returns. The committee also received the latest internal audit progress report, which confirmed that with a full complement of staff within the internal audit team, good progress was being made in terms of delivering the 2024-25 plan on time. You're all welcome to the next audit committee meeting on the 28th of March.
Thank you. Anything from the floor for that one? Nope. This takes us next on to the last item of this agenda, the questions from members of the council. Starting with a question from Councillor J. Arnold.
Thank you. So, my question, given the increase in workload that we have seen for those on the planning committee, is it not time to look at whether we need to reevaluate our approach to this committee? For example, can we explore other models that maybe other councils use to create a fairer way of committing your time to this important decision-making process, and as well as doing site visits? I know that we have members that could contribute and want to help on the committee. However, the sheer volume of cases means that members are struggling to commit their time to multiple days per week. So, my question again, is there something we could do differently?
Thank you, and I believe we have an answer from Councillor Paul Middleborough.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the question. The Planning Committee plays a vital role in ensuring sound decision-making, and it is reasonable to expect its members to dedicate time to this important process. The upcoming Planning Committee tomorrow on Thursday and the site visits earlier in the week are an exception, as all-day meetings are actually rare. We're also aware that the government will soon introduce a new national scheme of delegation for planning matters. Once the details are available, we will assess any necessary steps to ensure our own scheme of delegation aligns with and complements the national framework, and how that fits in with the role of the Planning Committee.
Thank you. Would you like your supplementary question?
No supplementary question, it's just that so we are awaiting, we know it's going to change and we are awaiting further information. Am I correct in saying that?
We're awaiting something from the government. What I would say, though, about the meetings this week, they are very much the exception. I mean, say, having been on this council with a 4-year absence since 2002, I cannot recall a meeting which has gone on all day, and I cannot recall two parts to a meeting in any 1 week. Others may remember certain things which might have happened in November, some other date going back, but I cannot recall it. And I would also add that the biggest part of the committee members' work is actually reading the agendas. And as we see, tomorrow's agenda runs into some 300 pages, which is a huge commitment. And I have spoken with other members of the committee about the way that the remuneration for committee members works.
Thank you. We have our next question from Councillor Dan Boatwright Green.
Thank you, Chair. With the recent increase in office use, the car parks around the Civic Centre are often full, making it difficult for those attending later in the day to find a space. What plans does the Council have to find a solution to this problem, given concerns local residents have with the increase with parking around residential areas?
Thank you. And I believe we have a response from Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair, and apologising, Dan, that I can't face you too easily. Yeah, we have been busier, you're totally right, with more staff in the office and with county council meetings occurring here, as well as partners meetings. The car parks are a lot busier during the day. At the moment, we've not had any complaints from local residents in relation to parking in their areas, which is good news. All staff have been advised that they can park at the Abbey car park as an overflow, as they were prior to the pandemic. And they have also been encouraged to spread out their working week, and in particular look to manage meetings by avoiding the busiest times. Members are also able to use the Abbey car park with their staff permits. Parking officers have been undertaking a survey across both the Abbey and Civic Centre car parks for the last 4 weeks, and have not identified a day when there was no spaces available in either car park. But we will continue to monitor because it is busy.
Thank you. Would you like your supplementary question?
First of all, I'd like to invite Councillor Morris for a little walk around so I can show you why I'm getting the complaints I'm getting, because it is evident that people are possibly just going, actually, I won't get in, and are actually just skipping trying. But also, just to clarify, was it there were no spaces, there were spaces available in both Abbey car park and our car park here, or there were spaces in one of them? Because I think at the moment we're having problems with people knowing where Abbey car park is, including me trying to give directions, and that's not always a good thing.
Happy to walk round, but Abbey car park, it is the availability in both car parks, both areas. Abbey car park's a great car park because you get to see the Abbey and walk through the park. So I would encourage all members to use that car park, get a little walk as well, and see the beautiful town of Pershore. So you know, do take that up. I'm happy to walk around and monitor the situation.
Thank you. And thank you all for attending. And that brings this meeting to a close. I don't get to do the gavel, do I?